everyone, and welcome to the Maitland City Council meeting of December 12th, 2022. If you would please silence your phones or electronic devices. We're going to start this meeting this evening with an invocation by former Mayor Dale McDonald. Dale,
thank you. Thank you, everybody. Everybody, please bow your heads if you would. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather and to gather under the safety that's provided to us by our first responders, our fire and police that we count on every single day and night. Please bless all those that are in pain and feel in great need today and tonight. They are many, and the needs are broad, and in your knowledge, Lord, you know exactly what those needs and what that pain is. Please, Lord, if you would, provide these folks up here on the dais to demonstrate the patience and the countenance to show and to provide the discernment on the various topics on the agenda tonight, and which there are weighty topics there tonight. So, Lord, we ask you in your most holy name, Lord Jesus, please help us to glorify you in all that we do. We ask you in your most holy name, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Dad. And if you would please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We have a presentation this evening for the employee of the quarter. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us this evening, but it's Jason Johnson. I would like to read what I would have read if you were here. Jason joined the city of Maitland in 2017 as an accounts payable technician within the finance department. He was promoted to financial analyst in 2018 and later became an accountant. He was promoted again to senior accountant in 2021. Jason performs a vital service each day to keep the city organization operating smoothly. In September, Hurricane Ian prompted him to go well beyond his typical duties to help city employees fill out federal time sheets and to ensure that all emergency work hours met strict requirements for disaster reimbursement. Jason stepped up again to help his fellow employees during Tropical Storm Nicole in November. For these invaluable contributions, the city of Maitland is proud to recognize Jason Johnson as employee of the quarter for the third quarter of 2022. And I'm sure that Jerry Gray, his boss, will send him our regards, and we do appreciate all his work, because we do appreciate everybody who shows up to work for Maitland. Here's Mr. Gray right here. We bring the plaque of the recognition to Jason. Do you have anything to say about Jason while you're here?
Well, pretty much what you said. Thank you. Yeah, sorry Jason couldn't be here tonight. He had other commitments, but yeah, I would say, at least on Jason's part, he was very humble in his work, and he would say he didn't go above and beyond. This is just what he does every day. It's nice having that level of precision in the accounting department where you, even though I like to hide the pennies, we sweat the pennies so they can, it's all there. It's all there to make it easier for you. But I really appreciate his attention to detail. It really makes doing my job so much easier, knowing that he does his job to the ability that he does.
Okay, great. Well, please do give Mr. Johnson our regards, and sad he wasn't here to us tonight, but we do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the old business. Mark, is there any old business to report?
No, sir.
Okay. Consent agenda. Is there any member of council who wish to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on consent agenda items 2 through 8? Seeing none, let's close the public period, and a motion will be in order.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda for December 12th, 2022.
Second.
And a second. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay. Let's move on to the public period, which is the period in which anybody can address council on any item that is not actually on the agenda. Is there anybody who would like to? Yes, would you have paper?
Just read the minutes. Shirley Welch, 530 Pawnee Trail. I've been in my home for 41 years. I think I bought it when I was 12.
Yeah.
Seems like it. I want to thank the council members, which I never get an opportunity, for all your time and effort for keeping the city moving forward and thriving, and I absolutely love living in Mayberry. I only had a few comments I was going to make tonight until I drove through Greenwood Gardens this afternoon. And now I have a few more comments and some questions. I know that Mark mentioned that I think it was a 3-year project. I remember from the last weekend, the last meeting, which I understand. But I also noticed that there weren't any holes in the front or backyards, and I didn't know if I just couldn't see them from the road, or did all the Spectrum and Century Lake lines also get buried in Greenwood Gardens?
Sure. Can I ask you, is this about the underground?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Is that not my time?
Yeah, we're getting there. I hope you'll get back. We'll probably get there pretty quickly. But this was,
Misunderstood.
Okay. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to let you know this is for the non-agenda items. And we'll bring it back up in a second. Anybody else have any comments for the public period? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And we have some decisions to make. We have 2 appointments to the Lakes Advisory Board. Lori, would you give us the appointments?
On the Lakes Advisory Board, there are 2 vacancies that are coming up. Mrs. Doris Hawk's first term expires this month, and she is not seeking reappointment. Also, Gary Voss's has served 2 full terms and is not eligible this time for reappointment. 3 residents applied, and all were selected. LAD is their second choice. That is David Beaver, Greg Harwick, and Colleen Lilly. Their volunteer to serve applications were included in the packet.
Okay, so we have 2 seats and 3 folks who have put their name in the hat to serve. So let's take the appointments one at a time. For the first seat, does anybody have an appointment or a nomination for the first seat?
I have a nomination for the first seat. This person has shown over and over again her love for the city and dedication, and has put in for many boards. I think it's a good opening for her. I'd like to nominate Colleen Little.
Okay,
The first one.
all right. We have nomination of Colleen Lillard. Does anybody else have a nominee for this first seat? Okay, no other nominees? Well, then what the procedure is we have a second and a third on this nomination. Ms. Lilly will be appointed. Do we have a second on the nomination?
I will second.
Third.
We have a second and a third. All right. Congratulations, Ms. Lilly. You're now a member of the Lakes Advisory Board. Let's go to the second seat. And do we have any nominations for that seat?
I have another one for that one. This gentleman lives on Lake Jackson. He's been living in the city for many, many years. His business is in the city, and he has a long resume of professionalism. I would nominate Greg Hardwick.
Okay. Greg Hardwick, we have one nomination. Are there any other nominations for the second seat? All right, seeing no other nominations, let's see if we have a second and perhaps a third for this nomination.
I'd second.
Okay, so first and second for Greg Harlan.
Third.
And a third. Okay. Congratulations, Mr. Harwick. I'm sure you're out there listening, unless you're actually here in the office. All right. We have now filled up our Lakes Advisory Board again. Congratulations again, Colleen. All right. Let's move on to the next decision item, which is the ordinance creating Article 5 special assessments within Chapter 2 administration. Lori, are you going to read the ordinance title?
Yes, sir. An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, creating Article 5 special assessments within Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances, providing for findings, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, would you like to introduce the item?
Sure, just real quickly. As requested at the City Council meeting on November 14th, the City Attorney has prepared an ordinance to provide the city with the opportunity to assess property owners for infrastructure improvements. The ordinance follows the same basic procedures as outlined in Chapter 170 of the Florida statutes. So as we talked about in the November meeting, this simply provides another tool in the toolbox for the City Council to, if they would choose in the future, to assess property owners for capital improvements.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions to Drafter Cliff or Mr. Regatine on this issue? All right, let's open it up for public comment. Does anybody from the public like to comment on this proposed ordinance?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. More a question, actually.
And your name, sir?
Oh, I can do that. You didn't tell me there'd be a quiz, John. Dale McDonald, 108 Tangelo Court.
Thank you.
Is this ordinance, because I have believed that, maybe incorrectly, that we've had an ordinance in place for quite some time to assess private property owners for various reasons over the years, and where we essentially, where the city may have actually paid for an improvement and then assessed the property owners a non ad valorem assessment that they would pay as part of their tax bill every year. Is this different from that? Is this intended, for example, to be exclusively retroactive to improvements already made, or improvements proposed to be made? And that's really my question. And it was making sure I was interpreting what I was reading in the agenda report. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. Anybody else in the public like to comment on this proposed ordinance? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And I think Dale and Cliff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that we have an ordinance on the books now. What we follow is the statute. So the four statutes that lays out the.
So we don't have one today
Right.
at all.
We have the statute, and we can follow the statute, but the statute has some additional things in it, some notice and some other things, and in order for us to consider using the special assessment the way we would like to use it without having to comply with those things, the other option is for us, through home rule powers, to adopt our own ordinance, and that's what we're trying to do. So now we will have two choices. We could still use the statutory mechanism if we chose to, but because of its additional requirements, time notices and other things, it's a little bit more burdensome, and particularly given the situation which is going to be under consideration in just one item, the possible undergrounding expense, this one will allow us to get there sooner.
Yeah, and going to Shirley's question earlier, perhaps Shirley's going to get this question, we'll find out, but in Greenwood Gardens, there was an assessment, and I think that assessment was done
For the statute.
for the statute rather than our ordinance. We could continue using the statute, or we could use our own ordinance. And I think your question, Dale, was, is it for prior or future improvements? And it's unclear whether the statute is meant to apply to prior or past assessments. I mean, and there's no case law on it, really good case law.
Well, in Greenwood Gardens,
So Greenwood Gardens is a prospective deal, and I think, that's traditional way to go, but this could be used, I think, any way we want to use it. We have no real authority to do it the way we want to do it.
Is this model put over after any other city, do other cities do have a similar ordinance?
The answer is, it was a conglomeration, but mostly, as the mayor indicated, it was an attempt to follow the statute without the parts of the statute that are problematic or having more freedom. So the answer is yes. It was modeled after several different cities. We looked at, took pieces and parts.
What's the best of it?
Yeah. We tried to make the one that's impenetrable by bullets.
Greatest hits, if you good luck with that. Okay, if there's no other further discussion, motion will be in order.
I'm going to let a lawyer do that.
Well, we have several around.
I would make a motion to introduce an ordinance creating Article 5 special assessments within Chapter 2 administration and setting public hearing and action date for January 3rd, 2023.
Okay, we have another motion.
I'll do the second.
Yeah.
Yep. Mr. Guthrie, got in the second. Laura, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, so that's the first reading. We'll have another reading on January 9th on this ordinance. All right. Now is the storm protection plan underground hardening project with Duke and Mark. Would you please introduce the item for us?
Certainly. As we discussed at the October 10th and November 14th City Council meeting, staff has been engaging Duke Energy in conversations of potential undergrounding of the electric systems in the Domrick neighborhood since prior to 2018. Starting in July of this year, Duke met with the city to inform us that they were moving forward with the reliability projects throughout the city. All these projects that we're going to talk about tonight are scheduled in 2023. The projects consist either of overhead hardening on some portions of the system and undergrounding of other portions of the system. As we talked about last week, hardening consists of replacing smaller poles with slightly larger poles. Lines are hung vertically versus horizontally. I included a lot of information in my staff reports over the last two agenda packets, so I'm not going to go over that in any great detail. I am going to go over sort of where we are right now and then answer the questions that came up from the last meeting. But I'll answer any questions that you might have from previous meetings. In terms of the 2023 undergrounding projects, those are on the screen right now. You have Domrick Estates. This is all lines that are south of Thunderbird and west of Seneca and Mojave, except for Domrick Drive, Arapahoe Trail, Seneca Mojave Corridor, which are on rear lots, and Wigwam Place. As you'll recall, Wigwam Place is a little cul-de-sac that's off of Horatio. That's on the same system as the Domrick Estates neighborhood, so that was also included in as part of this project. The Maitland Isle area, which is Mariner Way and Shell Point East and West, are scheduled for undergrounding, as is Hope Terrace, Lake Sedalia Shores, which is Pride Drive, Woolsey Drive over north of Sandspur, and south of Sandspur and north of Lake Sedalia Drive. Maitland Woods, south of Sandspur Road, Lake Colony Estates in that same area, and the Druid area, which includes Southview, Druid Road, Druid Isle Road, Lake Charity Drive, and Lake Hope Drive. Those are all scheduled for undergrounding in 2023. In terms of hardening projects, in addition to the undergrounding projects, this is a generalized map of where the hardening projects are going to go. From Domrick Estates standpoint, aside from the rear lot lines, are going to be moved to the front yard and undergrounded. Domerick Drive lines are going to be hardened overhead, as are Arapahoe Trail, as well as Seneca and Mojave, which are behind those homes, and then a line between Chippewa and Mohawk. Also scheduled for hardening are Lake Minnehaha Shores, which is Minnehaha Circle and Kyle Drive, as well as Hillman Avenue, which is just to the west of Sandsburg, just to the west of Maitland Avenue. Delroy Park, which is the Trotters area. West George and West Sevilia Avenues are also scheduled for overhead hardening, as well as Hillcrest Avenue. Gem Lake Drive, Grove Street, and Grove Court are also hardening projects scheduled for 2023. In addition to the more neighborhood-related undergrounding projects, there are also some corridor or neighborhood-related hardening projects. There are also some corridors that are scheduled for overhead hardening. These include Horatio Avenue from our eastern city limit all the way to Maitland Avenue, Maitland Avenue from Horatio to Maitland Boulevard, and Sandsburg Road, basically the whole length from Maitland Avenue to Wymore Road. One question came up at the last meeting that you asked me to work with Duke to get you an answer on. That was what would be the cost of undergrounding those lines. So they put together, this is a rough scale of magnitude kind of cost, so these are not the hard costs that if we wanted to move forward with that, they'd have to do some more research to get us those hard costs. But in terms of the scale of magnitude, on Horatio Avenue, you'd be looking at about $1.5 million. Maitland Avenue would be around $800,000, and Sandsburg Road would be about $1.9 million. To give some perspective on the scale of each individual project, Duke was asked to estimate the cost of each hardening project if the city were to decide to do the undergrounding. As I'm sure you recall, the way that formula works is they would take their overhead hardening cost versus what the undergrounding cost would be, and we would pay the difference between those two since they're already scheduled to do these projects. This list does not include Grove Street or Grove Court. As we've been talking with Duke about that, they didn't have those costs yet, but Duke has indicated it's a fairly small project in that neighborhood. So what we do have is all the rest of the costs. So basically we're looking at Domerick Estates, which is a hard cost at $900,000, and Minnehaha Shores at $200,000. Those are our hard costs that Duke puts time in getting those numbers together for us, where we had our initial meetings back in July. Then Delroy Park is the next most expensive at $315,000. I'll get to Hillman in a little bit at $220,000. That's a little bit of an anomaly, but the rest range between $30,000 and a little over $60,000. So they're a relatively small project, with the total being a little over $1.8 million. Since we talked a little bit about, this is a little bit hard to read, but as we talked a little bit about what assessments would look like with the adoption of, or at least the introduction and potential adoption of the new ordinance, I wanted to put together some costs of what a potential assessment would look like. Now you'll notice that there are a lot of asterisks on this table because there's still a lot of unknowns on this. So if we did the best we could with the information we had, and we move forward, if we decide to go forward with any of the projects, these would be refined even further. So the first asterisk is in the last column, the cost per home. That does not include meter conversions, as we've talked about over the last two meetings. Meter conversions can range between $1,500 and $2,000, depending on the home itself. We have not reached out to any electricians or Duke's non-regulated side to see what those actual costs would be, but this just gives you an idea of what it would be. So there would be, if we would move forward with meter conversions, those would be the cost to the homeowners if they would decide to do it. When we get to George, Sevilia, Hillcrest, and Hillman Avenue, the number of homes there in the second column is estimated. Since that's a grid system and it's hard to tell how each home is fed, we estimated what those number of homes would be. We think we're pretty close when it comes to those estimates, but they wouldn't be spot on. And of course, if we would move forward, we would get exact numbers there. Hillman Avenue is a bit of an anomaly at $220,000. It appears that there are 3 homes fed off of Hillman. It appears to function primarily as a branch line versus a distribution line. It looks like there are 3 drops off of that. So you see that how those numbers work out with Hillman Avenue, having potentially 3 homes fed off it at a cost of $220,000. It's a pretty substantial assessment if we would go that route. So that is a bit anomalous. So you have ranges from basically $9,000 down to 0. And since we had some discussions on what we would do in Domrick versus with the branch lines versus the distribution lines, I ran a couple of numbers there for what an assessment would look like if just the folks that were fed off of the branch lines, the overhead hardened lines, what that assessment would look like, a little over $9,000. And what if the assessment was spread over the entire neighborhood at 440 units, what that would look like at a little over $2,000. Again, this does not include Grove Street or Grove Court, because we didn't have those numbers when we put together our report for tonight. In terms of the questions that came up at the last meeting, these were the 4 primary questions, in addition to the question regarding the cost for the corridor, which I just touched on. First question is, why are streets to the north of Domrick project not included? What's the opportunity funding through the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, the Infrastructure Act that was adopted by Congress earlier this year? Was there any flexibility? Right now, when we had the initial conversations, our partners at Duke were saying that December 31st was a deadline for a decision, so we posed the question as whether that had any flexibility, whether we would get some extra time for a decision-making process. And then what would be the cost of a public involvement process to gauge the interest of the folks participating in the project. So, as to why the neighborhood or the streets on the north end of the project area weren't included, those include Thunderbird, Geronimo, Mojave, and Tuskegee. The answer is simple, and I think Eva touched on this at the last meeting, and she's verified it between the last meeting and this meeting, is that they are fed off of a different substation. So they're coming from the Castleberry substation, so they are on a different substation. Duke is coordinating projects as they move forward in the future across their system based upon what substation feeds it. So the Castleberry substation system is scheduled for the future, so they'll be looking at that sometime in the future. The second question was, is there any opportunity for funding through the IIJA? The answer that somewhat surprised me is that there is funding for resiliency programs. However, there are several caveats that go along with that. There is a section of the IIJA, it's known as the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships, the GRIP program. There's a federal allocation of the program is between $50 and $250 million. That will be allocated between 4 and 40 projects awarded nationally. And this is a very competitive grant process. And those aren't my words, those are actually the words that the Department of Energy put in the grant manual, that these are going to be very competitive grants. What the DOE is interested in is technical and non-technical approaches that improve reliability and resilience. This program is available to local governments, which is why it's the only one that we research. And again, this is due to the help of the project lead from Duke Energy, who's handling the IIJA applications for Duke Energy. He was able to point us in the right direction here as to what to look for. But local governments compete with regional and interregional governments, including multi-state applicants that are allowed to apply for this grant. What we would have to demonstrate is innovative approaches to either transmission, distribution, hardening of infrastructure, resilience, etc. We also have to show how it would be a benefit to disadvantaged communities. So competition there is listed on the last bullet point there. State, combination of 2 states or more, Indian tribes, a unit of local government, or public utilities commission. So when we're on the conversation with Duke, we would be competing with basically every coastal entity that is subject to hurricanes. especially with the history we've had this year. So we'll be competing with the coastal communities in the Gulf and the South Atlantic. Obviously, with the problems that the state of Texas showed they had 2 years ago when a cold front came through and their entire grid shut down. There's going to be a lot of competition with the state of Texas, as well as the state of California with the wildfires. So there's a lot of competition out there, hence the point that DOE said this is going to be a very competitive grant. There is a 50% cost share requirement for the receiving entity, but sort of the kicker in all this is that the deadline submittal is this Friday, December 16th. And as I read over the manual for this grant, the Department of Energy strongly suggests that the first piece of the application be submitted 2 days early. That was in bold and underlined. So that would be the requirement of the concept paper, which is basically a 20 to 25 page paper outlining your project and why it meets the requirements. So that application deadline would be certainly a challenge. As far as the flexibility on the December 31st deadline, Duke has indicated there is some flexibility with that deadline. So based on discussions which Eva had with her contractors, the commencement of the project could be delayed until April 30th. Duke Energy would require, if we would decide to go forward with any of the conversion projects from overhead hardening to underground, to execute a letter of commitment prior to April 30th. Then Duke would work with us on scheduling one or more projects, whatever the city council would decide to do if we go that course. And here again, the kicker on this one is, as we discussed at the last meeting, if the city were to commit to a project and schedule it over the next few years, if a future city council were to not fund that project, then that neighborhood would be bypassed. They would receive no undergrounding nor no overhead hardening. So if the letter of commitment goes out, we have to be prepared to fund it, or there would be some consequences. Didn't come up as a question. Actually, this did come up as a question. As far as public involvement process, staff did contact the company that assisted us with the public opinion assessment for library projects within either time frame, whether we were going to be looking at the December 31st time frame or the new April 30th time frame. There's really not an opportunity for meaningful public outreach to assess how people would feel about the project in their neighborhood, or an assessment that would go along with that. They indicated they could provide a similar service that they did with the library to gauge public opinion, which would be phone polling, which is sort of the shortest opportunity that we have to get at least a feeling for how people would feel about it, and that cost for service would be approximately $20,000. So that's what we'll be looking at for public outreach, at least in the time frames that we have available to us right now. It didn't come up as a question, but we did reach out to joint users. There were questions from a staff perspective that were still floating around out there that we didn't have solid answers to. From a Spectrum perspective, they have contacted both us and Duke and indicated that they would follow Duke underground on any lines that are underground at their cost. When the staff report went out, when the agenda went out, we hadn't received any information back from CenturyLink. Ms. Tracy has been sort of bird dogging that in terms of trying to get an answer from CenturyLink. So she had a discussion with them on Friday from someone that could at least give a partial answer. They indicated that they would go underground, or at least they would consider going underground, but it would be at the city's expense. So we're continuing those discussions to see where and how much, if we decide to go from overhead hardening to underground, how that would work. Tonight, as we did last meeting, we're requesting some policy direction on how to proceed, sort of to facilitate the discussion. This is the slide we had at the last presentation. There are three options broadly. That would be to allow Duke to proceed with the projects as their design currently dictates, or address each project, street, or neighborhood individually and determine funding individually. If we would go that route, we would have to put together a plan to notify everyone in the project areas, provide information to the affected property owners, and conduct some variety of public outreach to answer any questions that would come up. We also have to put together some variety of a policy to determine what level of support for a project would be acceptable and constitute adequacy to support and move forward if assessments were to be utilized to recoup any city costs. At the November meeting, the council felt that this really wasn't a viable option. However, I wanted to keep it here since that was just a discussion item and not a decision item, so everything would be out on the table. The last option would be to establish an undergrounding program for all the projects that are proposed to be hardened and devise a funding source. It would be envisioned that for these last two options, there would certainly be an impact on our reserves and potential impact on future use of general fund capital and how that capital is allocated in the future. Another consideration that we have to take into consideration is that we're just talking about 2023 projects right now, because that's all we know that's going on. We do know there are projects in the future. We just don't know what those hardening and undergrounding projects look like. So any policy decisions that are made as this first batch of projects come through would extend likely to future projects. So the question tonight is, where would you like to go from a policy perspective? And any input, direction would be welcome. If you have any questions, I would be happy to try to answer them. And we have our folks from Duke here too to handle the more technical stuff.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions of Mark?
Yeah, I guess, Mark, it's kind of known that we're a little short-staffed in Public Works. If we asked them to take this on, how much time would that detail to say, we want them to look at, the IIJA and to work getting these underground and talk with CenturyLink and the cable company? What are we looking at there?
Well, that would, depending on the option, no matter what, if we did it, it would turn into a project. Because in addition to, if we would go the IIJ route, which would not be a staff-driven function, I don't have the staff available or the expertise on staff to be able to put together the plan that the Department of Energy would want by Friday. So we would have to, Ms. Tracy's made calls to some of our consulting engineers to see if they would have the staff available in short notice to put something together. We have not heard back as of tonight. So that would not be an in-house issue. In terms of coordinating with CenturyLink and Spectrum, and in addition to that, as we do overhead hardening to underground conversion, we also have a responsibility for everything that was on the red lines that we talked about at the last couple of meetings. That for those areas of the project, we would be required to get the easements required for the transformers or switch gears, so we would have to bring somebody on board probably for that, one of our property acquisition specialist consultants that we use. And then it would turn into a project, and we don't have our full staff in Public Works, so we would take a look at the project allocations we have right now, see what kind of time we could free up to assign that to one of our folks, but it would be challenging. The other option would be to bring in one of our consultant project managers, but even when you do that, somebody has to manage the manager. There's still a project for the city, and there's going to be interaction with our residents, so you still need a city face on that. So that would be something we would have to determine what.
So that would be an unknown cost that we would have to add in that we wouldn't even know yet, because you'd have to have project managers and.
Yeah, we'd have to take a look at how we reallocate the time management for that. So, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess we have Duke representatives here who wouldn't mind, answering questions you have some.
Yeah, so the current projects that we've got slated for 2023, do we have any idea from the Duke perspective what percentage that represents? Meaning, if there was a commitment to go forward, and the policy objective was to try to underground, have you all given any preliminary kind of thoughts on what the cost would be on the projects going forward? Is there any indication yet, or no? Is that just, you're too early on in the planning to give us an estimate of what looks like a hardening project versus what you're gonna underground on your own?
Yeah, I would say it's too early to talk about 2024 estimates. We haven't scoped them out completely on our side.
The answer, since it wasn't caught on
Yeah.
microphone, was that it would be too early to estimate those 2024 projects.
And as far as, do we know what percentage of users this impacts? Meaning, is there any way to gauge what this cost would be? I mean, the issue is, what I'm trying to get at is, we're being asked to try to set an objective or set a policy on a go-forward basis, but we have no idea what those costs are. So it's sort of hard to set a policy direction when you are writing an unknown check on that policy. So if there were even guesses around what that could be, you could help frame the policy. But at this point, for us to start down a road, we're really not. We're just not. I don't know how you can do that on a policy basis when you just don't have any idea. That's my struggle with this. So it doesn't sound like you all have. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that's wrong or it's not okay to not have that information. I'm just, if you don't, then I'm not sure what we're being asked to fund.
He wants to get one Chris Keating with Duke Energy. So just to be sure I understand your question, you're asking about really everything going forward for 2024 and beyond for a complete underground program for the city?
So it would be an idea. So you presented, you've come to us and said, hey, for 2023, these are projects we're going to undertake. We're going to underground this. We're going to harden this. If you want to underground the hardened lines, it's going to cost you. You've got a set amount for the Dominic Minnehaha shores. The other amounts are good estimates. I'm not predicting, right? They're not just throw it out of the air. They're based on some analysis you all performed. I think my question is, if the policy directive is where Duke is not going to underground, the city would like to have an opportunity to do that. The cost on that on the go forward, if the policy is, hey, we want to do that, to not know what that cost is for 2024, 2025, 2026, we're setting a policy objective that we really don't even know we can afford. I mean, there is a limit. We do have. I wish we had the money on a tree somewhere that we could go get and pay for it, but we don't. So that was what my question is. Is there any sense of what this could be on a recurring basis annually? And the answer is no, then that's
yeah. The answer is, I mean, I'd imagine you all have similar issues to a degree of trying to estimate every road, sidewalk, water project from now until 10, 20, 30, 50 years. A big cost variable for y'all is getting what projects is Duke going to pay for, because that's going to be the big factor versus what would we not pay for. What's a feeder line versus just the service lines and the laterals. So again, the answer is going to be no. The only other factor I can tell you that's worth considering is that, again, if you wait till after we harden it and then you want to bury that line, there's a big cost difference, the before versus the after. But there's no way for us to just go through and say, this is everything that, year by year estimate. I mean, that's really impossible for us to be able to put that together.
And do you all know, and I drive around, I can see somewhat, but the percentage of homes in the neighborhood, once you get off of the east side, so the east side is the older neighborhoods with the higher percentage of homes that have power lines in the backyard. As you moved west, there's seemingly less, there are newer neighborhoods that get where the power is already undergrounded. So I don't know if, is it a good analysis to say that the costs that have been up front to pay for Domrick and Minnehaha Shores of the older neighborhoods, is it fair maybe that there isn't such as big a cost because those lines as they move west are potentially already underground? I don't know if you've already done some of that analysis or not. I mean, I know I drove around just to see what was above ground or below ground, and we did this before. What streets already have sidewalks and what don't, because sidewalks are a big importance for us too here. So
no, so we haven't done a citywide analysis based on that. The only way for us to start with, or we could run a few queries through our GIS program to figure out how many miles of laterals are underground versus overhead, meter underground, so we can do this or that kind of a broad analysis. I'm not sure that's still going to get you to the level of detail that you're really looking for of a kind of a year-by-year projection that's just going to give you these big numbers, and it still depends on, is Duke going to do that project, or is the city going to do that project, going to pay for that project? So those are the big questions.
And is the algorithm that is used to determine whether a line is hardened or undergrounded, would it know that the city would pay the difference if you were decided to underground it versus harden it? Meaning, would the deciding factor, would the department that would know whether or not in the future if you were going to harden or underground, would it know that if you decided just to harden it, that the city may contribute to underground it?
We do not factor in potential city decisions into what makes our
So that would be
list.
an independent consideration.
Yeah, that is engineers with blinders on,
Okay.
figuring that out.
So one, kind of going along the same lines, I understand it, you brought up the city's kind of view of how it's going to deal with waterways or sidewalks, whatever, the budget goes on forever. My understanding of this, though, is this is a discrete program, right? It's a storm hardening program that you all went to the PSC to get a rate increase, so that we're already paying for the program. So there is a program that you get your arms around, because that's, I mean, obviously the rate was aimed at paying for the program. So we'll be paying for the program. I don't know, I mean, clearly Duke is a very large entity. It has communities all across Florida and the southeast that are dealing with. So you had a program, and I don't know, did that large program from Florida that you brought to the PSC, did it include a look at individual communities all the way through, like, for instance, in Maitland or in Oviedo, we're going to have to do this. We estimate it's going to cost us $20 million, therefore we're going to need X amount of, rate, multiply that across how many communities we're dealing with. So there is a program to be funded that you all are funding. Do you have, kind of going back to Mike's question, trying to figure out what your budget is for the city of Maitland? I mean, do you know what that is generally, how much money you're going to put into Maitland in the next 5 years during this program?
So we have a budget at the substation level, not the city level, but to get to what you're asking for is, can we figure that out? It would take some operations at least to figure out what that investment would be for 23 and 24. getting past 24. I think that's what we're able to speculative. Okay.
I think it's a 3-year.
Okay, so we could possibly get into 2025 and be able to take that data from the substation level, figure out where the city boundaries are from those lines, and try to get to a number. But again, those cost projections are further out, they're a little fuzzier past 25. We don't know yet.
Okay. And that would, I mean, I guess when you get down to it, the engineers with lines on go into it and say, this is the type of the neighborhood where we would do the hardening here and the undergrounding there, because this makes sense based on the reliability goals we set for ourselves. That's essentially how that goes. All right, and so the policy that I see coming out of this, if we were going to adopt policy, that I was thinking about would be if a community, and I mean, we could use Dominic as an example because it's the one we pounded on hardest here, but just any community came to the council and said, we understand that in 2024, Duke is going to underground / harden our community or our neighborhood, and the difference between undergrounding and hardening, is going to cost us $200,000. And that community can come to the council and say, we're aware that this is going to happen. We think it's worth it to us to pay the difference. And so the policy would say, when a community finds that it's going to be underground and they can, or desires to go underground, they can come to the city to ask the city to essentially act as the bank on that, to pay Duke, because obviously that's where it's a city to do relationship that enables the underground, the difference there, I guess. But other than that, the city really doesn't have any role in this. Some people are under the impression that the city has more control over this than we do. And really, it is a Duke customer issue. It's less a city to Duke issue. Although the city can help in the undergrounding by acting as either paying for some of it or just acting as the bank when a community wants to come in. So the policy that I was thinking about would be fairly simple, that the community comes in, that the burden's on the community to come in and determine whether that community wants undergrounding such that it would either assess itself or allow the city or ask the city to assess it in an amount that would cover the difference between undergrounding and hardening. And the city, they would ask the city to participate in that as well. And the city council, whatever city council was sitting at that time, could have the option to either act as the bank solely or to participate in the undergrounding as well. Because I think those decisions are going to have to be made, on a year-to-year basis. I mean, they're going to be dependent on whatever budget the city has at that time. And so I think that sitting here now, the policy would not be rely so much on what the actual requested funding is as to allow the future council to make the decision whether it wants to participate or not. And I think as to kind of getting down to the Dominic example, if Dominic were to come forward and say to the homeowners association, we've polled our people, we've got 70% who are really fired up about undergrounding, and they're willing to pay an extra $2,000-3,000 per home over the next 5 years to go underground. The city would then, that sitting council would then make the decision whether they wanted to make that payment to Duke and then turn around and assess the community and pay itself back, or not, or participate as well to match some funds or something. But the policy that I'm thinking about really is a fairly simple policy. That's my thoughts.
So on that, John, you're saying the city would do the assessment, so they would have to front the money to Duke.
Right.
So whatever that is, the $2 million, whatever, and then take it back after years. I mean, so many years. Because if I'm right, if Duke does the assessment, they can only do up to a certain percentage for a certain amount of time, and I think after the numbers were run, we come off still $2,000 short of what Duke would do, so the city would be on the hook for that, so.
But in any scenario, the city fronts the money.
Yeah,
We write the initial, the city as a whole writes the bigger check initially and then collects incrementally. So again, you would have to have the money, Mark and I talked about that, you would have to have the initial money in fund balance to pay for it. And you would get that back over some period of time if you did it over 10 years. And so depending on how fast they go and what you're talking about doing in years.
well, here's my concern is, you know, I mean, they already know they have a 24, 25, probably 26 plan. I mean, is that an assessment we're gonna do every year? And then, you know, you're talking $2 million a year for the next, you know, 4 years, that's $8 million. Where does that money come from? Do we raise taxes? I mean, where do we get that money from?
Well, Vance, that was what I was trying to get. That was that initial question was,
Yeah.
because if it's $2 million a year, then, and I agree with John, you have to go kind of you gotta go what you know at a time. And so we now know at least what you're gonna do in 2023, and we can assess in 2023, but we've got a plan for the future. And so if the thought is it's $2 million a year, then we have to run the numbers out and then figure out, do we even have it in a fund balance to be able to do, and then how quickly do we need to recoup it in order to have sufficient fund balance, and then do we run out of that kind of dollars that we could allocate to those types of projects.
Yeah.
But we don't know, we don't know that information.
And I mean, if I'm Ridgewood, who's already undergrounded, if I'm Greenwood Gardens, who is already undergrounded, or, you know, a new development on the west side that's already undergrounded, I'm paying, you know, to get these people undergrounded. So my taxes get raised to do that. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a concern for me.
Now I understand your point a little more, to maybe clarify one thing too, is these programs we're doing through 23, 24, 25, there's no, this is because we've done that assessment with engineers and identified these as targets. There's certainly no guarantee that in 26, 27, that anything in Maitland will be part of our storm hardening program. There's plenty of communities right now that have no projects in 22 and 23. So there's communities that come on the list because of that assessment, but then they could go for several years where we don't come back to this program to anything in the city of Maitland. So we can't guarantee anything that we're going to be coming back or even have something every single year. So if you wanted to underground anything, let's say 26, hypothetically, if we don't have anything, if you wanted to underground something, that would be a completely city-driven project. And that's why it kind of makes it harder for me to even estimate anything to you.
Yeah, so I wasn't speaking of anything that we would initiate. These are projects you initiate and say, we're gonna come through here and harden, cost X, the underground cost the delta, Y more. Does the city want to participate in the delta? And now it sounds like, so currently do you have, and I think, John, this was a question you asked, that there is no current plan to go east, is that right? That's not in any of your 2023, 24, 25 hardening project, like the east side of Domrick. Let's say on the other side of the school for geographic purposes. Is that?
I think it's still city as Casper, so.
It's the Castleberry.
It's the Castleberry substation.
It's the Castleberry
sounds like.
substation, which is a 2024 target, but what's hardened, what's underground.
Still not
We don't
decided.
know that yet. It's being worked on by engineers.
So there's a good chance that the east side of Balmer will be, when the Casper substation comes up for its own hardening, undergrounding, whatever improvements, that neighborhood will be part of that.
Whatever the current reliability situation dictates, yes.
Okay. And I guess, you know, part of this is really kind of, a big part of this is a timing issue. So, I mean, you know, we've been talking about undergrounding in our states for a long, long time, but, you know, this project came up, this program came up for us, it seems, very quickly. But if we're going to set a policy, I mean, people have to move pretty swiftly. I mean, you're going to want an answer quickly. As I understand it now, the answer has to be given before April 30th for if we wanted to take something underground now. So in our situation, you know, this policy would work this way in the Domrick situation. Domrick, I guess I'm not so worried at this moment about raising taxes and everything else on everybody, because I'm not even sure if people in Domrick want to pay, you know, the assessment. So if they came up and said, yeah, we got 70% if you want to do it, and then we know what that cost is, $900,000, then we start moving. But until the neighborhood takes the first step, you know, first it learns that it's on your program list, and then it turns around and says, oh my gosh, we got a couple months to figure this out. And there's a lot of education and surveying to be done real quickly. But if the neighbor is not interested in taxing itself, I don't see it going anywhere in any case. I mean, I don't think the city's in this program just to pay for undergrounding for the sake of undergrounding. So if the policy is, you know, step A, community comes to the city council and asks for the city council's assistance in undergrounding, what they have to come with is proof that the actual neighborhood is interested in doing it. It's not, you know, just few representatives. It's going to be a fairly exhaustive. And it's not. It's a very difficult question. So, you know, Mark said they went to he went to the polling outfit that did our library polling, and you know it's an art and a science, and but the question there is pretty simple. It's like, do you like libraries? Do you trust your government? Do you, whatever? And I mean, there's lots of ways to answer that question, but in this one, the variables are infinite. I mean, the variables are, you're going to ask somebody in a neighborhood, do they want to take their utilities underground at significant personal expense of $2,000 or $3,000 a house? That question you can get your arms around, but then you have to throw in the other variable, which is that you understand the pole's not coming out of your backyard. You're going to pay for this, and the pole's still in your backyard. Well, why is that? Well, because actually the internet cable is not coming off the pole. So if you do that, it's going to cost you another $3,000. And then you go into iteration after iteration after iteration of these different questions, and it's a difficult thing to get your arms around. It has taken us 3 meetings here to kind of, and we're still hammering at it. So for a community to come up to speed and be educated on what the actual costs are and what the actual result will be is a tough thing. And so we may never have to pay for anything ever, because it's got to be a community-driven thing. It's not a city-driven project. And the residents of any given neighborhood have to come with the proof that the residents are interested in paying for it to a certain degree. Maybe the city participants as well, maybe that. But that's a pretty high hurdle to come in right off the bat. As Mark said, his folks say they can't even do it. This outfit said 4 months is not a meaningful time. I think we're a little smarter than that. I think we'll figure a way to get that question out there to people and it can be done. I don't think that outfit can't do it, but any neighborhood association can have a few meetings and work it through. And if they come to the council at that point and say, yes, we're interested, if we can show you the evidence of 70%, 68%, whatever the percentage of us are willing to tax ourselves for this, then I think it's a viable question for the city council to go forward with.
Playing out your scenario, John, though, I mean, I think you go to someone and say, do you want your power undergrounded? The answer is going to be yes. Almost. And then they're going to say, well, you want to pay for it. And then I think the second question is, what's the cost? And based on what you all are saying and I'm hearing, you would have to know, we'd have to know what you're going to underground versus harden, and then you have to come up with that delta. Then we have to go back to the citizens for that input. And so are we ever going to be at a timing element that works for you all? Because we understand you want to move forward with this. I'm sure you like Maitland, but you're probably also tired of coming to these meetings. So you want to move on, and you want to know what you got to do. And so we're asking in this potential scenario where they have to come back, present, then we have to go back to feedback and schedule that feedback, tell people what it's going to cost, and then set the metric. So it's the timing of it seems like it would be difficult every time. I don't know that there is a scenario, like this one was challenging, but I think if we're setting it up where you want to get public input and say, do you want to tax yourself, how much, getting that information out there, I think that's going to be it's going to be a tough timetable, I think, no matter what, but that's just my.
Well, I agree. I think it's tough. I mean, I think one of these slides has shown us, more, that the maximum potential for this year's program is 1.8 million. So we know that. I mean, if any neighborhood now is interested in doing that, then I haven't heard from anybody from the other neighborhoods about they're interested in undergrounding or having assessment. So I'm not sure how big an issue this is citywide. I know in my neighborhood it's a big issue. And whether or not we have a policy, I mean, I think we have until April 30th to figure it out.
The Hellman one is an example of how this gets pretty challenging because it's 233,000 a home?
220 total, 73 per home.
Okay, sorry, 73,000 per home.
And that is, if I know the difference between a cable drop or a CenturyLink drop or a power drop. I was eyeballing that.
Let's just say that's an example.
But it's a big number.
Right, it's an example of, well, clearly when we got to that group that'd be a challenging ask for them to participate and say, yeah, we'll tax ourselves $73,000 a home.
Yeah.
So then you'd be looking at the city participating and what does that mean, and how does that look? So I think that's just an example. It's easier when you run it out and you say it's going to be a couple $1,000s per home, and then the city should finance it and spread it out, and then it's an achievable number potentially. But 73,000 seems like a tough ask.
Can I just clarify on the April 30th? I was a little confused. Is April 30th just we do have that time no matter what, or that was only if we asked for an extension and the letter of commitment and all that came into play? And I know there was something that if we did a letter of there were a lot of ifs then. So is April 30th a new deadline, or do we have to take action?
April 30th, just to put it in perspective from the last meeting to this meeting, April 30th is the new December 31st. So we would have to have an answer to do of letter of commitment on what we were going to be doing by April 30th.
So there's no action needed today in order to extend that to that point?
No.
Here's my concern with making a policy decision, and I do appreciate that, John, that you come with your open mind. Let's think outside of the box. I really, and I'm grateful for the conversation we're having here. My concern with setting a policy was actually Mike's question, which the second he asked it, I realized, wow, that really tips our hand, because I'm sure Duke saying that their engineers are operating with blinders on is probably true, but they made $10 billion in profits last year. They don't do that without making financial decisions that benefit the company. So, I would just hypothetically assume that the amount of undergrounding versus hardening that we would see next year, if we set a policy decision where they know, hey, the city has made a policy decision that they are going to go ahead and pay to make up the difference between the hardening and the undergrounding, that next year we see more hardening, less undergrounding, because they know that we're going to make up the difference. And the year before that, and the year after that, call me cynical, but they're not a nonprofit.
And Lindsay, that's exact. I think I made that point in the last meeting, because we teach them how to treat us. So I mean, I know that's a bad phrase.
So I know that things are done for the financial betterment of the stockholders. So I'm just saying, we lean our hand here to say, yeah, we'll make up the difference, and now all of a sudden, what are we making up the difference for in 2 years? And suddenly, what have we committed to? And I will come back to my same statement I made last time, which is we are mortgaging the future of the city if we make a policy decision that we are going to pay to do this, because we get ourselves into a position where we're either picking and choosing neighborhoods who we like over who we want to benefit from this, versus parts of the city that are already undergrounded or are not going to be hardened, and now we are taking away from opportunities to build out infrastructure and to do projects in those parts of the city. I think we can't make everybody happy with this, but it makes me very concerned that we would be putting ourselves in financial peril to do what is being asked of us on the hope without much prospect of any certainty where we're going to be going. We know the cost for this year, but we don't know the cost for next year or the year after that, and I'm loath to go above and beyond what is being presented to us. I would rather say thank you very much for coming in and doing the work you've identified, and I appreciate that your engineers have taken the time to decide what is in the best interest of keeping the lines running. Because remember, it's in Duke's best interest not to have to make regular trips out here to fix the lines and to put everything back and keep the power on. So, if they've decided that these are what makes the most amount of sense to keep the power on for people, I don't have an engineering degree, I would have to trust it. I'm just really concerned about us mortgaging our future over this project.
Well, and I'll even add on to that is that everything that we would pay to go underground, when our agreement ends in 2035 or whatever it is, we'd have to buy that back from them. So we already paid them to put it in the ground, and then we'd have to buy it back. And the question was asked, do we get credit or anything for that? And the answer was no. So what would be, 4.5 million now, we don't know what that is in 2035. That might be, 10 million.
What I heard Miriam saying, correct me if I misheard, but is not really inconsistent with what I hear you say, which is just that at this point, this is not a city-driven project, those are the exact words, and so, we can't say we'll take it away from residents if they want to buy, in this particular case, if they're on this list April 30th, to say, hey, we, have these certain parameters in place, like this many of us, because part of our conversation has always been for us to go out on a limb and, what you're saying, Lindsay, to kind of front this money on a hope and a prayer that maybe we can later tax the residents who we're not even sure want to be taxed, that doesn't seem appropriate, but that if they want to come to us and say, okay, now we have these sort of different parameters, different place that they kind of did on their own to establish to make us feel comfortable, that we can do that because we can go back and tax them later because they've decided, they've shown us evidence of that we wouldn't foreclose that possibility, but certainly not that it's some sort of policy that we're going to do anything unless someone in, a neighborhood initiates that. And I also don't really hear in that policy that it has to be related to a Duke carbon project. Theoretically, they could come to us from wherever that's not on the list. That's a different proposition because then we don't know the amounts and, so on and so forth. But
then we're in the business of deciding what percentage of the population of that neighborhood is a threshold for us on council to say, sure, yes, 65% of the residents want it hardened, not 70%. Do we have to find a new magical number to say, oh, well, anything 50 plus 1, and then there we are.
I think that's a valid question. I would assume that if someone came, a representative of whomever, as we know, that no one has done that at this point, other, they've shown these meetings, and said, what do I need? Then that might be a fair question, and I don't know, but I think that we're not there. So I still hear that, I am in agreement that in terms of those three options for today, my direction at this point seems to be number one, allow Duke to proceed, but we still have until April 30th, so that doesn't require anything at this point. And then if that becomes, if that changes before April 30th because of something like that.
So let me say before they want to. So one, I don't think I hope that what they're saying, and I trust what they're saying, that they've got a different department that's going to look at this.
Yeah,
So they put up with us, for lack of a better word, you showed up, so I'm assuming that you're going to be straight up with that this is going to be an independent decision. So I'm going to take that as on the hard, before you go, and we discussed on the hardening side of it, on this last storm, so we had the first storm, power went out a lot over around Maitland, and then you came in, and subsequent to that, you did a bunch of tree trimming, and I saw trucks all over the place. You did a lot of, and then in the second storm, which obviously wasn't as significant as the first storm, a lot less power outages, and then the power outages I knew, there was one a couple streets away, a tree actually took the line down. When you do this hardening project, is there any way we can work on some more of that extensive tree trimming to prevent sort of the future problems? I know the poles go up, which helps, but I looked at it, when I drove around, it still doesn't take it above some of these older trees that are, especially on some of these lines that are in the backyard. Is there any program that helps with getting some of that? And then there's a corollary to that, which is part of our urban reforestation stuff, which a lot of the trees that we've got adopting, especially dominant, are older trees that are starting to come down in general. And I think the city could do some things to start replanting some trees in front yards, doing some streetscape stuff. But is there anything on the Duke side that could help on that hardening that also takes down some of those trees or trims them back so it's not a recurring issue?
So, well, the answer to that really is yes. So the best course of action there is for our regional vegetation management manager, basically our forester, to work with you if you have an arborist or somebody to really handle that in the city, for them just to coordinate. So we can do tree trimming based on our hardening needs. We have very we have laid out cycles for where we need to trim and when. But the best thing for that is coordination between our vegetation management people, your arborists. That way we're going after areas that we think are most appropriate, and might have some more feedback too. So that's a big coordination thing that typically happens between Duke and local city with arborists.
Because there is I think Mark and I think John, I drove by and I saw the same neighbor that visited me was visiting John. I'm not sure if he had the same comments, but there was someone who knows trees was saying there are things we could do and things we could do better about trimming these. And so I don't know, Mark, if there's an opportunity to coordinate with you all and then try to work on our replanting of trees, but also trimming some of the trees back. Dollar Drive, Arapahoe is an example. Currently, where the lines come down, there are a bunch of trees that, and one fell in the last storm. It just missed. I don't know how it missed your poles, but it crushed a house and some cars, but it missed your poles. But it's things like that if we could get some of those problems out of the way, then I think hardening would look like just as much of a reliability improvement as undergrounding, because the tree issue is really the problem, especially in Dominant. But that's just if we decide to go with just the hardening option, working with the city on that tree trimming aspect, I think would be a reliability.
If I could just add to that, Karen Conley, community relations, but we actually partner with the city of Maitland every Arbor Day for our Right Tree, Right Place program, and our vegetation management is out there giving trees and trying to educate residents and giving trees away on what trees are appropriate. We send out a letter every year on, this is our 3-year cycle, and that we'll be in your area, and there's the public engagement. So I just want to let you know that there is education and activity going on from our vegetation management department to your residents, and we try to partner with you on educating residents on what trees are appropriate to plant near the power line, if there are power lines in their properties. So, but we're more than happy. I would give him contact Mark, had my cell number, he knows how to contact me, and I'm happy to get our vegetation team out here to, educate.
Because the backyard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The backyard ones are primarily not, I say right, transmission, right? But there are the Seneca ones, and then the Chippewa Mohawk one is a transmission line, and those are backyard lines. And
yeah,
you did a lot of trimming on those lines, from what I can tell. But the trees are, even if you go up 5 feet on those lines, the trees are higher than that.
yeah.
So there's still that potential. So the most we can do to prevent that, I think that would be
Yeah, we're.
But again, I mean, that's coordination. I'm just trying to think, if
Yeah.
we're gonna tackle this issue and while y'all have been here and
Yeah,
spending
if
so much time
you'll
with us.
decide to stay overhead, yeah, we're more than happy to get our vegetation team to help you understand, yeah, what our process is, how often we trim, and how we can help educate residents.
Okay. Why don't we open the public period? Thank you, the representatives, for all that. But let's open the public period and get some other perspectives on this. And Shirley, go another hour before she can get out. But thank you for hanging in there with us. All right.
Let's try this again. Shirley Welch, 530 Pawnee Trail. I've been in my home for 41 years. Thanks everybody for all your hard work. I love living in Maitland. So regarding Greenwood Gardens, a couple of my questions have been answered. The CenturyLink and Spectrum, it appears that they were all put underground at the time Greenwood Gardens was done. And according to this, it looks like Spectrum's agreeing to do that, so that's just leaving the poles with CenturyLink if we all go underground. So that's a positive thing. I noticed when I went through Greenwood Gardens, and you're not gonna like me for this, they're charming street lamps. And so I was thinking, as all of these power lines are being put underground in everybody's front yard, part of our QMP that was back in 2006 that we often refer to, streetlights was part of that plan. And it was going to be included in the underground utilities and everything else. Domrick Estates residents have complained many times for many years about the very dark intersections in the early morning hours when the high school kids are waiting for the bus. So I have no doubt that everybody would like to see streetlights included in the discussion and part of the plan. We know that back in 2006 we had a little over 80% approval for the QMP, which included all underground utilities, street lights, roundabouts, renovated entrances. It would really be nice to see them also during this time to include the street lights. My guess is we probably have 50% turnover since 2006 on our residents. So 50% of the owners right now don't even know what the QMP is, and they did not vote on it 16 years ago. So, but we do have 50% of the residents that did vote on it, that have already been through the approval process, that knew about the QMP and what we were going to do, and were willing to pay for it. So we really have just to educate 50% people that have moved in during that time on what we want to do and how we want to do it, and whether there's an assessment, how much it is. So I think that for the people that have lived here for a long time, that's going to be an easy answer for them. It's going to be quick. They're going to understand the process. With that being said, I am currently the president of the Domrick Beach and Civic Association, which encompasses this whole mapped area that we're talking about regarding the utilities. And I've heard a number of residents and we've got a very active board right now, and we have very active members, and I want to let you know that in a very short period of time, we could get a whole crew of people to canvass the neighborhood with your guidance and your instruction and your information package to go door to door. And knowing now that we have until April 30th, I think that is very doable, if that's something that we can do. I've got, half of the residents, I have their email addresses. We have their phone numbers, and so half of the battle can already be taken care of, and we can get started on a quick basis. So by April, hopefully I I could come with you with a survey and 100% approval from all the residents. So just know that I'm willing and we're ready to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl.
Anybody else?
You know I could.
I defer you, yeah.
Yeah, you go first.
No, you go first.
I can tell you, yeah, go ahead,
Okay,
please.
thanks. Hi, I'm Curtis Hero, 106 Kyle Drive. So that's in the Minnehaha Shores neighborhood. I've got a few concerns about this. First of all, the grant application, we just need to stop talking about that. It's obvious that that's for an innovative program, it's for a high impact program, and we don't have time to even put an application together that's even going to be considered. So let's take that off the table. You talked about not knowing costs for 2024 and 2025. We still don't even know the cost for 2023. There's a lot of hidden costs here. There's a lot that's still on the individual homeowner for meter conversion, which I'm not sure what that means, whether that means that if you stay with your aerial feeder from the street, whether that meter would be converted, or if you can stay with your own meter, there's a meter conversion cost, right, for each homeowner. There's also the appearance of making a choice between hardening or underground. And when I look at my current situation, the power company is still responsible for the feeder line from the pole to my weatherhead. Okay, that goes away under hardening, apparently. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that feeder line then becomes the responsibility of the homeowner to provide and to maintain. I don't think it's right to ask the homeowners to pay for something and have increased costs and higher risk, okay, for a hardening program. I don't understand that. So the current situation that I have is, if something happened to my power line up to the weatherhead, I call the power company, they take care of it. If it was an underground system, that's a lot of cost to be using directional drill or open cut across the driveway, damages to irrigation, and that all becomes, quote, city costs, which actually ends up becoming homeowner costs. I don't think that's fair for those costs to remain hidden. I mean, if you really want to be upfront about it, please be honest about what the homeowner's cost will be, not just the hardening of all the transmission lines and then leaving out a bunch of costs. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro.
Let's see, Dale McDonald, 108 Angelo Court, and I love agreeing with Shirley Welsh anytime I get the chance. And with Curtis. Both make valid points. And Shirley was here, I was here in 06 when that Q&P was done, and the expectation was something different. It was a different world then. But, and John, of course, our mayor is very aware. The decision was made in 2005 that stepped on what our vision of the city, entire city, may have been. So, 30 years later, we're going to try to make a decision again. We can't undo what we've already done. Now, I don't truly know, and I probably understand better than most, the relative difference between the reliability of hardening or underground. There are pros and cons both ways. Now, to be able to decide that and to take an extra 4 months to help decide what the community's vision might be, and Shirley made a great point. I bet the vast majority of their residents in Domrick Estates kind of think they know what the best thing is to do, because they voted that way in 05 or 06. So we haven't even talked about fiber optic, so things that we can try to do that leave it better for our children and grandchildren. That's what we're really trying to envision here. And if so, are we willing to pay it forward to those kids that we may not ever see it when this thing gets completed? But is that not the job of the community stewards that sit up here? And so, again, agreeing with elements of what Shirley had to say and Curtis as well, you guys have your plates full. How much do we want to commit to the next 30 years? That's what we're trying to get started with. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale.
Sorry to keep you here longer. I'm Alan Thatcher. I live at 1685 East Ratio. And I just have a few bullet points I want to mention here. So I do believe that Duke Energy has proposed an appropriate no-cost improvement for the city of Maitland. More importantly, they're proposing this to 1/7 of our residents. So for us to delay this, that's kind of ridiculous in my mind. Now, I do live on Horatio, and my feeder line will be coming directly off that road. It will not be buried. It will not currently be hardened. So when we start looking at special assessments, boy, I hope I'm not on that list, because I'm not going to have any benefits at all from it. So I vote for looking at option number 1 and allow Duke to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to address us tonight? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And turn discussion up here. And there were a couple of questions that if Duke representative or two wouldn't mind helping me through this. I have a couple of questions that came up from our residents. One had to do with the streetlights, and so that was a program we were going to, and again, this was from 2006, our own QMP, and it was a generation of Progress Energy representatives before you all, but part of the deal was we were looking for a way to put in attractive streetlights when we do get it around. Is that any part of what you all are doing with hardening your undergrounding? Is that the cross streetlight issues?
So streetlights aren't part of the hardening program, so anything to do with streetlights, that would be, we would look at that separate from the project. But there could be a construction advantages of tackling streetlights during the construction of this, so there could be make more of a convenience of trying to do both those projects at the same time.
When you would go then in like on a street that you were going to take them off the backyard and bring them to the front yard, would you then, if there is that gooseneck stippler or that style, would you keep that and go back up with that, or how would that be handled? So right now, if it's coming from the backyard, they run a line to the front, and then you got the big pole with the, it's called gooseneck roadway lights,
yeah.
Would that stay? What's that?
I think the style is just called roadway, like the highway.
Okay.
We're talking about like the Coke.
I'm sorry, I don't know what it was called.
Yeah.
There's a more elegant.
There is an elegant.
So yes, because it should be, if it's in somebody's backyard, it's actually a private area light, so they pay for that.
No, they're front yard, so they're
lighting up the road.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
So they're the, and I think I've seen it. My street doesn't have any, we don't have any lights, but like on some of the streets, like it comes off of the backyard, and then it hits the taller pole, and then there's a light that then shines for that street. Would that stay?
Yes, it should.
So you would replace that with a different, so you would essentially go underground, it would hit that pole, go up, that light just stays. It would be replaced with the more conventional kind of street lighting.
Correct. I'd have to look at the specific scenario, but any existing lights today should transfer somehow.
I'm sorry, I thought that was just.
No, that makes sense. So who would pay for the more attractive street lights?
The HOA or the city or whoever, yeah.
Okay. And Curtis had a question about meter conversion, and it would help me as well. So the meter conversion, as I understand it, is when you, currently everybody who has overhead aerial, coming into the weatherhead, that's a certain type of meter, and that's, you have an aerial service line. If you go underground, then you will, in my situation, it's currently in the backyard, I guess you're going to go through the front yards now, and you would bring up the service line along the side of the house, probably the same general area where my meter currently is, but put in a new meter there. And that's what a meter conversion is. That includes undergrounding the service line?
It does, yes.
Okay, so meter conversion includes the aerial and the service line.
And so to just address something you said though, if your meter can is in the back of the house, to move it to the side of the house, it would possibly require quite a lot of rewiring inside your house. So it would depend on a case by case, so I couldn't answer without seeing, but we may just choose to run the service line to the back of the house. You still need a meter converted because right now there's a hole in the top of your meter for weatherhead, so you need to meter that.
Right. So the term meter conversion for 1,500 or 2,000, whatever you think it is, includes the burial of the line and a meter.
But the people that are designated to be undergrounded by your choice, their meters are converted at no cost to them. It's only if we decided to underground more, would then those meter conversions be at the individual homeowners. Right. And sorry for jumping in here.
That's fine.
The other point was the overhead lines that currently run from the transmission, the lines that go to our house. So that if those fall, whose responsibility is that currently? So if that gets hit by a tree, it's just my line coming from my house to the pole. Is that a homeowner responsibility or a Duke responsibility?
So we call it a point of connection. So you currently have an overhead, so there's a weatherhead. The stack that comes out and the wires come out here, and there's a point of connection right there. So if a tree comes down and hits it here and doesn't break your weatherhead or anything like that, then Duke repairs the service line.
Okay.
If your weatherhead breaks, you have to hire an electrician to fix your weatherhead.
Okay. And is that any different when it's undergrounded? Is the point from that run from the...
We still own it.
You still own it.
So if the underground goes out at your house, we would come out and repair that.
So there's no difference
Correct.
truly between...
The point of connection is inside the meter.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one clear.
Yeah, that's good. And so the feeder lines, the poles go underground, but there's no, or is there an additional burden on the homeowner with regard to the repair of any kind of power connection? It's the same thing, it's just underground. Duke owns it all system, service line is perhaps an issue for the homeowner with the distribution.
We own this, I don't know what you mean by service line, but we own the service line from the road to your meter.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. That's all the questions I had.
Well,
Did you miss one?
my last one is if we delay till April 30th to tell you, does that delay you? If we said tonight, here's our answer, would you start sooner or? Okay. So if we delay till April 30th, we are in effect delaying you. You've just said we won't stop your project if you wait till April 30th, but if we said yes or no tonight, we would move forward and get this thing going.
And just to clarify, so I have given the contractor a schedule, and so the main artery that goes through Maitland is now at the end of the schedule based on these conversations. So even if you said go ahead today, I think they've made their schedule, so they might not start until February, March, April anyway. But yeah, we would say, okay, we're good if you want to redo your schedule, but.
So if y'all started in April, my question is about hurricane season. How long would it take you to complete what we're looking at, these projects? I mean, it would be, less homes would be done by hurricane season, correct?
But the Dominic Drive run is still the one that goes first, but the other one was not even slated until the next year anyway, right? Is that still the case, or did that get reshuffled? I know you were still working on the schedule, so.
Which other one are you referencing?
So there's the two feeder lines, there's the Arapahoe line
Okay,
and the
in
Dominic
Dominic.
line.
Mhm.
And so I think what you were saying was that the Dominic lines and then those that are fed off the Dominic lines will actually go in 2023. The Arapahoe line and the homes, the streets that are fed off of the Arapahoe line are actually 2024.
I think so, yeah, towards the school, yeah.
Well, the Seneca, yeah, so the Seneca gets real close to the school.
Yeah,
Seneca
but
goes-
Arapahoe towards the school.
As you're going
Yes,
east.
Yes, that's 2020. So-
No matter what.
Right. Yes.
Okay, anybody have anything else from you folks? Thank you. So, you know, we are where we are, and, you know, if, I'm still of the mind that as it has been for the last 20 years, I mean, if any neighborhood wants to come forward to the council and say, we're interested in doing this, and it's not something that is, and it would be reimbursed to the city, so there's really no cost to the city, other than maybe the cost of the time. I would be inclined to take seriously the request and, you know, to let the city assess those houses, that if there were a majority of them who want to be assessed. Or, I mean, a solid majority, not just, you know, I don't think we need, the policy itself doesn't need to say what the percentage would be, because it's going to be a decision for all of us five in any case. I wouldn't put a policy in place that binds the future council to have to bank on something. It would always, to me, be a discretionary item based on whatever the budgeting is and whatever the circumstances of the day are. So again, I don't know that we're going to have a policy here tonight. I didn't hear a lot of action toward that. But that said, if there is a neighborhood who wants to come forward and say, listen, it's going to cost, you know, several $100,000 for us to underground, and we'd like to pay for it, but we'd like the city to put up the money first and we'll reimburse, I'm willing to listen to that. So, and I don't think by doing so, that necessarily teaches Duke how to treat us. I mean, I think that there's an element of that to look out for, perhaps, but at the same time, if that's the position, then you're never going to do anything. I mean, if you will just, at that point, be saying, we're not interested in assisting in undergrounding because, you know, it's for the reason of, we can do what you pay for it. And then that's a reasonable position. Someone wants to take that position, but it doesn't include my consideration of somebody coming forward and saying, will you help us underground our neighborhood at our cost? Right. And they have any other views on this? Help us get out, and I'm not sure what you're looking for tonight, other than.
I agree with you, John. I just don't know how that plays out. I agree with you. I just don't know how in reality that plays out. I'm not sure that, I mean, I just don't know how we can pull that off, even in the best of scenarios. I don't know. Given, in this particular, it's one thing if you say a neighborhood wants to come in and say, we want to put in an entry feature or a water, I don't know, something that you can, the city has full control over. But when you're dealing with a partnership with anybody, a utility provider, or anybody that is really a partner with, I don't know how you can do that effectively given their timetable, their parameters, what they're willing to do. I think maybe the second half of Dominic, maybe we know that from the Arapahoe side, we could actually, but with the Dominic Drive side, I don't know how we could effectively do that without delaying and then missing the opportunity potentially.
Let's just say, for example, that Trotters and Oakley all get together and say, yes, we want to be underground. And then they come to us in February because they've had enough time to get themselves organized and get their petition signed. And we have 100% of the residents who are not only willing to be undergrounded, but they're also willing to pay for it, right? Hypothetical, give ourselves the best case scenario. They are now coming and asking us to take $300,000 out of fund balance to pay for this up front, and they'll pay us back, but it's going to take 10 years for the city to recover that $300,000. We are now all sitting here in February and March and April trying to figure out what projects we were going to do next year that are now going to have to be delayed because we now don't have that $300,000 to pay for Kim's West Side sewer improvements, or to pay for, you know, the refurbishment of one of the parks that's on the Parks Master Plan, or, you know, the sidewalks that we wanted to get, which requires easements to get around, and we were going to pay the residents to get those easements to be able to put in the sidewalks. I just, you know, the list goes on and on of all of the hundreds of little projects we've got. I'm not saying in the abstract that it doesn't sound like a good idea. It does, but when we have, and we would be confronted with those people coming in front of us and saying, this is something we've asked for, this is something we want you to do it, we're willing to pay for it. Are we willing to finance that for 10 years, or how? It's not going to be immediately, you know, we pay for it and then next week the residents are all cutting us a check for $2,500. It's going to be a several year period where we're now putting all of our residents on a buy now, pay later plan, which I think if we have multiples of those going on at the same time, even if we only do 2 or 3, how are we going to end up paying for that? Because now we're coming out of pocket for projects we didn't anticipate. And everything that we do and everything we learned from Sharon's good governance was we have to put things in the budget that we can anticipate. And having residents come to us in one project at a time and say, we want you to pay for this, we want you to pay for this, even if we have 100% sign up where we're all agreeing to do it, how does that affect our budget for all of the things we have forecasted into the future and we have budgeted for if we now have these unexpected expenses coming at our front door, which it's impossible for us to ignore when we have 100% of the residents who are all willing to do it. I think it puts us into a precarious position. Not that it doesn't seem like a good idea, because believe me, I would love for us to be able to underground all of these projects. But if we do that, we are sacrificing the stability of finances that we have created over a very long period of time to get us to where we are, where we can forecast multiple years ahead in order to make sure that if Mark needs to quickly buy 5 or 10 pickup trucks because they're available, that we have that money sitting there. That if we need more police cars, we can reach into the budget and we can buy those because we have been fiscally sound. So that's where I'm at. I think it sets us up in a dangerous way.
To piggyback off that, I think there is a difference kind of you're identifying between the abstract and setting policy. And if I heard a little bit like that it's possible that if we give the go-ahead tonight to do as opposed to waiting until April or some other time before that there is a possibility that we could move up these projects back, or, you know, that's kind of more of a possibility. I think that's relevant. I think that also if we're saying kind of theoretically, maybe if residents could do this in the future at some point, you know, that we're not saying it's bad, as opposed to kind of dangling a carrot to people in a very specific situation, as, you know, some of them are saying, we'll go and we'll get these petitions, and I know that they probably will do that. Are we misguiding them by allowing them to believe that really will then happen? And then I believe that a lot of your concerns become, you know, relevant in terms of what we determined tonight. And in hearing Mr. McDonald talk about the future and kind of how our decisions impact that, I think I see it the same concept in a different way here, that I can't control what was done 20 years ago or decided, or whether I think it should have been or whatever, but we can control what we do now, and by continuing to set up things because they sound nice, but that we don't know that we want to put other councils in the future in that position. And we have elections before April as well, realistically.
I think it's tough though, because I don't know about we've been talking about undergrounding for a long time, and it was a stated priority of the city at different times. And this does seem like if we pass on this, it is a lost opportunity to underground.
I think that from my perspective, that this experience, and you guys can tell me, you know, because you've all been there already, this experience of learning everything we've learned has probably changed the perspective on what undergrounding looks like, and the priority in terms of what that realistically, because the whole point, Dominic, of why they are on this leading this conversation is because we kept asking for a quote, which kind of goes to this other point of if a neighborhood came to us that was not on one of these lists and said, hey, we heard about that great policy and we want to do this, but we didn't know anything about cost because it wasn't on one of these lists, then we have to go to Duke and ask them, what is the cost of undergrounding this neighborhood? And then they may take 5 years, as they did, or whatever. And Mr. Guthrie brings up the idea of potentially in the future buying back our, power, which seems to me the most impactful thing we could do, but we can't control that right now. I agree with you. I completely agree with you in terms of what impact or what message we're sending in terms of what is possible. But I think that might be based on what we've learned.
And I agree, we've definitely become more informed, but John, we've had dominant undergrounding in the CIP line item for a long time, and the resident, every time we have a storm, power go out, we go talk to residents, we'd say, hey, it's coming, dominant underground, it's in the CIP, and this is the time, this does seem like it is the time to do it, it's just the mechanisms to get there seem very challenging.
Well, Mike, I want to use one of your phrases that I hear, and I'm glad I get to use it. I think it's 30,000 feet. The 30,000 foot, it looks great, right? Then the closer you get, you can find out, the more details, and it's really different than just saying, oh, but yeah, underground is great. To your point, it's like underground, we all need it. Yeah, we all want it, and then, like you said, we've been educated. It's not as simple as saying, yeah, let's underground.
Well, even some of the things we've learned about different feeders, being in one Dartmouth neighborhood, but I think the point is we're in this position that seems impossible, which we've established in terms of the circumstances and timelines. It's not what we thought when you guys said CIP in Dartmouth. You didn't anticipate that it would look like this in terms of timelines and all of that. But at the same time, if it doesn't happen in this project, then we also heard Duke say, well, once we harden into underground, it becomes a completely, more difficult proposition. And that's what I mean when I say we've learned more about the situations that have been beyond the parts of this that are beyond our control.
Are we better off letting Duke do what Duke does for the next couple of years and then come back and go, all right, Duke didn't get this part. They're not coming back to do this. And then hitting those areas. What I'm really going for is I'd hate to go ahead and do something that Duke may already in the future have in their plans. So I mean, we could have the residents go, yeah, we want to do this, and let's use the Castleberry feeder as an example. That I think it said they might have it in their plan for next year, so those residents in that area may get it. So I just hate to do something and then we're already putting money to it.
Honestly, to put a positive spin on everything, one thing we didn't know when y'all were talking, or that you guys and everyone else before didn't know when we were talking about CIP and all these things so long ago, we didn't know that Duke would come in and offer to do a lot of this for free either. And that also, from a positive standpoint, you guys couldn't have anticipated, and that's a positive development, and I wouldn't want that to be lost. And we've had a couple of residents even tonight kind of focus on, please don't mess up the free stuff, as well. And so I think that that's another positive piece that couldn't have been anticipated at that time either.
If they had come in and said they were going to do all these things for free and said we didn't have a choice, we'd probably all shake your hand and thank you very much, and you'd be celebrities and you'd walk out of here and we'd all be appreciative. It's just when you've been given this opportunity or potential of the choice to get it all, and it was at what cost, and what is that cost, and then it goes down, and then it's very complicated, because I think the overall objective I have heard for years was underground when possible, and not just everywhere. And that's been what we've had is underground, the electric where possible, and we don't like the aesthetics of not just the reliability, it's aesthetics, it's both.
But what if someone came tomorrow, what if Duke came tomorrow and said, we can underground all of Maitland, and the delta is $2 billion. Is our policies underground whenever possible? Do we do that? Where's the line?
Well, I think the line is pretty, it all, as difficult as I said it was earlier, it also seems to me to be very simple. I mean, it's a very simple procedure to say tonight we have a concrete example right now, because somebody just, the HOA president said, some of you ought to do this and I'll go do it. So the policy would be, it doesn't even have to be a policy, it really just has to be, this is a simple way to look at it. The homeowners association goes out, gets, I want to say 70% approval of the residents saying we want to essentially tax ourselves sufficiently to put all the electric underground and the cables as well. And they come back to us and they say, okay, well, that's going to be $1 million. The figure is going to be $1 million. And that's easy enough. I mean, that could happen in a month. I could see that happening in 2 months or a month. And nobody's put off. Nothing has occurred. I mean, nobody's going to go underground and start any construction for the next until February anyway, or March. And it's not, I don't look at it as a 10-year payback either. I look at it as a 3 or 5 year payback, a short term. I mean, if you're only asking $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 per house, I mean, you don't need the 10-year payback period. You need that pretty quick. And in the meantime, we're out $1 million, but we're getting paid back a third of that $1 million every year. So our budget is not that thin. Our budget, I mean, we're not living hand to mouth right now. I mean, we have plenty of stuff. We have plenty of reserves. We have a lot of reserves. I mean, we have millions of reserves that are sitting there to be reserved to be tapped when necessary. And you can say this is a necessary tap. We'll do it, and we know this. We know what the cost is, roughly $1 million, and we know what the next neighborhood would be, roughly $200,000. So I mean, the scale is not going up. The scale is going down, and it's not an unknowable figure that will come and swamp us someday. I mean, it's because every council gets to sit here and say yes or no. We've already said yes to Greenwood Gardens, and that didn't swamp us. And that was $500,000. And they're underground, and we were able to pull it off, and yet continue to pave our roads and put in sidewalks and improve our parks. So this is not that complex, really. Again, I would put the onus on the homeowner association to come in and say, help us out, city, be the banker. And if this council, because this council will be sitting here for the next 3 or 4 months, at least until the next election and probably afterwards, is not interested in doing that, then yeah, I agree that we shouldn't send Shirley out and Colleen out and to go waste their time. But there are willing volunteers to go and say, hey, city, we're here to help us. Come help us, and we'll pay for it ourselves. If we're not willing to do that, if we've now changed the script and we're saying, no, we're not even going to help partial undergrounding. We're really not interested in undergrounding. We should tell them that. And that's the decision before us, because it sounds like what I'm hearing is we're interested in no undergrounding. We're hoping that Duke will take care of it for us. And if that's the case, I'm sure dozens of communities across the country, across the state, across the country do that. I mean, it's not an unusual thing. But given the opportunity to underground, like we have now, it seems odd to me that all of a sudden the council is saying, no, there's no scenario in which even we're going to help out in a partial underground situation.
So I'm with you. So play it out for me. So how do we do it? So Mark, can we rely on? So Domrick has an HOA. Does Minnehaha Shores have an HOA, an official HOA that is, and the Domrick HOA is actually not even an official HOA from my, it's a volunteer. Yeah,
I would also caveat Mark's numbers on Domrick specifically, the per cost, that really fluctuates all the way up to $9,000, and that's based on that legal question regarding who we can really assess within Domrick.
We can assess them all. We can assess them all at $2,000. That's the answer to the question.
Okay, because that wasn't
I like the certainty of that.
I appreciate that too, but can someone give me help on where that 9,000, why that's, my last recollection of the city attorney's advice was that there was a question regarding the assignment of benefit, who benefits and who could really be assessed, and that's where that variation, I know that's where the variation in terms of what Mark was doing came from. Is that not a question, or?
Can I just, before you answer?
Oh, please answer it for me.
I'm just going to say, for the record, I'm not sure I like the definitiveness of the person in the middle stating that, so I don't know that we want to put on the record something that's less than definitive of that answer in case we decide to go with that, so.
Well, let me back up my own assertion then, and then you can tell me when I go wildly wrong.
I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying, even if you're right, I just like having that being what's on the record, is that.
Right, I think that the way that I went through, and we were told one thing, but in fairness, we were told one thing, and that it was going to be difficult, and that it was legally difficult to do. I think that either the question was misconstrued or the answer was misconstrued, but the way I read the statute and the way I read the cases, the city council, whatever municipal government, county, whoever, has fairly broad discretion to determine what's in the best interest of the community. And if there is a good or colorable argument that everybody in Donald would benefit from undergrounding, and we've heard that it would, and we have, there are varying opinions about the extent to which, but it's not a scientific deal. We don't have to say, Shirley Welch on Bonnie Trail gets, a 30% bump, therefore she has to be assessed exactly 30%. I mean, it's more of a rough justice kind of thing. And so the initial $9,000 was predicated on the idea that only those who lived along those red feeder lines could legally be assessed. I don't think anybody thinks that. I think that is, you could, if you wanted to assess that way, you could, but you don't have to. If you wanted to say everybody gets something out of it in Donald if we're going to go underground because the cars are not going to be hitting the poles, the wind is not going to reach there, whatever. There is a good and colorful argument that reliability improves. And I think because there's also the other looping in if we're going underground, the entire thing goes underground. So you can say everybody benefits to we can say as a city council, when the evidence that we've heard so far, there's a benefit to the neighborhood such that everybody fairly gets an equal assessment. Now, whether or not anybody wants to do that, or I'm just saying you can do that. And if you did that, somebody sued you, you'd be in pretty good shape.
Okay, I think I understand that part of it. Then I would just say, then for purposes of like people going out and asking the question, that if I were to later have to approve in any manner in my role here, as an assessment based on this, that it would be important to me voting on such a thing, like in a special assessment in the future, to know that all of the people polled that approved that knew the nuances of what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and I would say, to your point, I spent an inordinate amount of time digesting all this information, trying to make it harder, and I made it harder and harder and harder to the point my head almost burst, and then I had professional help come in, and not saying it was therapy or anything, but I had professional help, and I think I wrote down an informational sheet that is digestible for everybody, giving all these different scenarios, saying, you would have to know that, yes, you live on Choctaw Trail like me, and I'm going underground for free, yet even though I know that I'm going underground for free, John Lowndes, living at where I would otherwise go free, I will pay $2,000. And that's the kind of thing I'd like to see sitting as on council, saying that people didn't just say, oh, nobody's going underground unless everybody pays. I mean, it would have to be full and fair information that everybody had. And so I gave that to Shirley, and I said, here's a survey that would impress me. But I want everybody to know what the ins and outs are, and that they should know as well that there's more money coming, or more undergrounding coming to get the cable and internet. I mean, so there's all that stuff has to go into it. So I don't think it's as simple as I said earlier, like the phone polling for the library. I think it really does take some education, and so that's. But that, having said that, I'm going to take that as an educational process. If that educational process gets done, and we're happy with whatever the survey results are, they're not, some nonsense like, I agree to pay, whatever, or don't agree to pay. It comes back to us. The mechanics of it are, thank you. If you wanted to keep it going quickly, you said, thank you for giving this to us on January 31st. We'll determine it on our next February, middle of February. We determined in the middle of February meeting that we're interested. We immediately swing into action on Cliff's new ordinance, and we are able to go into, I don't know if we're going to with the equalization board meeting and everything, you then kind of go into the process of assessing people. I mean, you wouldn't have to do it immediately, we could wait 6 months and do that, but we would have to come out of pocket quickly for Duke at that point. And we'd have to have at that point the idea in our mind that yes, that everybody sitting up here was going to assess in order to give the money back.
So we would have.
So I understand, I mean, yeah, and I mean, Shirley even said, hey, we have a very strong HOA right now, and there's times that it's very weak. So a lot of these, like, who would do this for Delroy Park, George Avenue,
If they
Sibilia?
don't, then they lose.
So they don't have a representative, they don't have an HOA.
Sorry, it's up to them. As I said, it's a community-driven deal. If Delroy Park's not interested in undergrounding, then they don't come and we don't pay. I mean, that's that simple. I mean, only those communities or neighborhoods that are interested in getting it would come and ask for it. If they're not together enough or don't want to know.
Okay, will we do some outreach and tell them that it's available?
Yeah, you could certainly push all that out and say, this is the deal, this is the delta as well. I mean, it's 200 grand for your neighborhood or 300, whatever it is. Are you interested? And then send them off on their own. But again, it's not, I don't want people to think that this is a city-driven deal because we're not even partners with Duke on this. I mean, we're really just a check writer. So, you know, every neighborhood would have to come to us. The onus would be on them to do it. And we just happen to have Domerick because we've been queued up on this for so long that they're ready to go. I don't know that anybody else would get it together.
So play it out, just if you're going to use Domerick as the example for the other neighborhoods to follow, then you've got and it is an HOA, but it's a volunteer HOA. So that, and I'm not even sure from a membership standpoint, even if you were to poll the members, how many members do we have in the Domerick HOA?
A little under 200.
Okay, so we have less than half of the houses are even currently members of the HOA. So I'm just playing, I'm not actually, I like the idea. I'm just trying to, I think for the last few months, we've all been trying to figure out the mechanics, because like I said from the outset, the answer is, do you want to underground? The answer is yes. The tricky part is figuring out how to do it. So if we go on this example, we go out and we do an outreach to, let's just say in an HOA you have 50% membership. What's the percentage of that membership we would take to give us the green light to go ahead and do it? And I know we don't want to set the number. I know you don't want to set the number, and I'm okay with that, but we have to start thinking about how this plays out and what would the question be asked, because the question to the people would be, it's $2,000-ish per home if we do it to all 440. But then to the homes that are on the red, if I've got my colors, the red lines that don't get undergrounded by Duke, then there's also the meter conversion cost for those houses. So that's an additional, what's the number, 1,500 to 2,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we have to say it's 2,200 plus if you're not on that line, it's 1,500 unless we want to bake those costs into the number that then gets spread out evenly to everybody's assessment. And that gets even harder, I think, to sell, because then you're really, the tangible benefit to that person is off. So I think you have to go to the homeowner and say, you're gonna have to pay 2,200 plus the mailing would have to be targeted, because it would have to say, hey, you're on a red line, so you're gonna have to take the extra $1,500 charge if you wanna be underground. And so you would have to get that level, in my opinion, John, we'd have to have that level of detail to get accurate feedback, because short of that, the survey result would be far from reliable, in my opinion.
I agree, and that's why I say it really, initially I wouldn't worry so much about the homeowners association. I mean, I think it's Shirley's and Colleen's misfortune to be on the board at this time, because they would have to go out and do it, but it's not a matter of them reaching out to the association members. It really is a matter of them.
All 440?
Yeah.
But they don't have the contact information all 440? I mean, that was why.
I
mean, you would. You'd have to go door to door. You'd have to leave it on, and then you'd have to have, hey, you're at 1,600 whatever. You're a blue, so you would only have to pay this amount. Hey, you're at 900, so whatever it is, and you have to pay this plus that. It would have to be that level, in my opinion.
So let me just say, I said that I talked to Shirley about this earlier. I can, maybe the mechanics of this would make some sense to you. So if this were the survey, and there are 3 questions for and you went to every 440 homes, and here are 3 questions. Please circle the one that reflects your opinion. Number 1, Duke should complete its undergrounding hardening plan without cost to me. And that's, just move on and do what we're doing. Or two, I live on a street in a blue line street. So Duke will bury my lines to my home at no cost to me. Bold. However, I am willing to pay $2,000 so that Duke will also bury the power lines on the line shown in red on the attachment. Okay, so then you know who those people are. Or the third option is, I do not live on a street, a blue line street. So Duke's plan to harden power distribution to my home. So Duke plans to harden power distribution to my home at no cost to me. However, I am willing to pay $2,000 so that Duke will bury the line shown in red on the attached map instead of hardening. And then the last one is, if you circle that one, then are you also willing to pay the $1,500 or $2,000 to have that under? And we would have that information. It's not up to us to get that information. If they were to bring us, or any other community were to bring us that information, you look at it and say, well, clearly, yeah, they all said they want to go underground, but not one of them is willing to install pay $2,000 in the new meter. So you're going to have a situation where they're pole after pole after pole after pole down. So I'm not voting for that. I mean, but it would give us the information to say at that point, yeah, I'm willing to go in this or I'm not. But that would be the level of detail I'm looking for.
But you would only get two questions, because why would the person on the blue have input on the red? It would be, if I'm on the blue, I'll let the red person, if I'm on the, whatever. If I'm on the portion that's not getting undergrounded, which is the red, I would circle or have the question of two, which you were saying, to be, yeah, sure, I'll kick in the extra $2,000 because then that helps the person in the red get theirs underground. So it really.
But then you also have to sign. You have the address.
Understood, but you only answer. It would really be you would issue the statement, and everyone on the blue would get the two questions. Everyone on the red would get two questions. You'd eliminate the question that's not applicable to.
Yeah, if you walk down the street on the red line and say, I do not live on a street that gets underground for free, so Duke is going to harden the power to my home at no cost to me. However, I'm willing to pay $2,000 so that they will.
Right, so the survey, in my opinion, you have two different surveys. One for the red people, one for the blue people. Which I think you have to, because again, you can skew the results, because arguably if you were a red person, you would answer number 2 in the of course every time.
Yeah.
I'd like to see an extra question on there if you're going to build a survey. It would be, how does this impact my decision to whether or not I'm also going to pay for a library? Because we've mentioned the library before. That is also something that we are already committed to coming to the residents in 2023 with our hands open and asking for them to be willing to pay for the library. So if we're already getting the residents in this particular neighborhood that we have focused so myopically on to pay $2,000 to be undergrounded, are they also going to be committed to paying an additional $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is, when we come up with a number for a new library? This survey sounds kind of crazy to me, because I'm not sure. We're up here discussing a survey for one particular neighborhood. I don't understand what we're doing right now. Can we just call a question, please?
I agree with John that that it's not like the city is, when there's money to do this, we chose to do it. But
yeah, no, we got.
I'm just trying to work through how, because John, I just wanted to just make sure that I understand the mechanics of the idea, so that to me, we're extending. We would all like to see it undergrounded, and we keep having these meetings, trying to hope that there's going to be an answer. But even if we go down the road that you're proposing, because I do think it's a valiant effort, because I do think we're missing an opportunity to do it now. If we don't do it, we are missing an opportunity, because as you said, they're going to spend the money to harden it. We're only paying the delta. If we were to do it later, we're going to pay the full thing, and as we all know, costs get more expensive. We are missing an opportunity. I just don't know, John, if we do what you're saying, if we actually are not in the same exact place, because I don't know that there's a scenario in which we have enough information to give to the public, because we don't even know some of these costs. And there are opportunities that if you said to them, I mean, really, street lighting is what we've heard a lot of, and if we're going to spend all this money on it, really what we'd say is we got to what a missed opportunity to not, as they said before, to put some streetlights up. And so what is the cost if we didn't do any of the undergrounding, we let Duke do their thing, and then we came in and said, hey, actually what we want to participate in is street lighting, what's that going to cost us? So I think there's a lot of questions, but I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I'm willing to go with you. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics of it, and if we aren't in the same place on January 31st.
I agree that the information that we're talking about in theory would be helpful to me. It would be just as helpful to have community-wide information for every single decision we made. If I could see real-time polling on everything I did, that would be super helpful. So you don't think that the information we're discussing would be, would not be like, it would be the best case scenario. The issue is I wouldn't feel comfortable giving any kind of suggestion from myself today that if someone did go and get 80% or 70% or whatever, that I would give the green light on whatever date. Because there's too many variables. Because it could be 20 neighborhoods that come in, and as Lindsay pointed out, that might affect my decision making on that. Even if the neighborhoods all have 100%. They don't know, it would depend, Lindsay's talking about 10-year repayment, John's talking about 3. All of these factors would make, so I wouldn't feel comfortable saying today, you know what, yes, neighborhoods go and do this, and know that I can give you any indication that I'll feel any differently in January, February. I think that oftentimes there's kind of can kicked a bit to avoid making decisions that are unpopular to people sitting in the room. But I think it's our job and my job, and as I said today, to be decisive, because I think that's what's best for the entire community. I would feel comfortable giving direction today.
And here's my concern, and I like where you went with this. I think it's a good idea, but I think to Mr. Wild's point is I think we'll be back where we are because to get that 70-80%, one, it's going to be really hard. A guy who's canvassed and done this before, I mean, if somebody's not home, you're either going to have to be mailers. If you go door to door, they might not be home. You leave it, it's not getting sent back. Even if you do a mailer, we know what that's like with the city when we put stuff in the water bills. It's like, boom, throw it away. So, that would be a concern of mine also.
I'm willing to go with the give it time to get the information. If I can, John, if we can get to a point where I think we can get information that'll help. I just don't know we can get there, but I do think I'm struggling with it because it is an opportunity lost. Because I think John, you've talked to the people I talked to in the neighborhood, pretty much overwhelmingly want to see things underground. But I don't know what that looks like in real numbers because it's those are the people that I walk around and talk to. But I don't know what sample size am I looking at and what does that really relate to? Is that truly 20% or is it 80%? I have no idea. Until we actually went out there, I just don't know.
Well, the people who talk to you, was that a question both of y'all asked to them? Are you willing to, compensate for the other homes so we can get everybody undergrounded? That's just my personal interest. I was wondering if you like.
I think I've heard both ways. I've heard both people. Obviously, I've talked to people on the Blue Line Street who say that's fine. They're circle number one of the survey to say, I'm happy, move on. It's going to be underground in my backyard. I don't care underground the red lines. I've heard other people who live on those streets who would pay the extra just to get it all underground. I guess either for aesthetics or reliability. And of course, the people who live on the red line are most vehement about wanting to get it underground. But it's a mix, and so that's why I would put any presidents to its own proof. I'm not out here trying to give away free money to any particular neighborhood. I'm just saying give people an opportunity to come forward and let us play the banker and work. It's a small risk to the city. It is a budget adjustment, but it's not money that's going away. So that's where I am on this. But at the same time, I agree that we shouldn't send anybody out to go canvassing spend the next 3 weekends in a row canvassing on something that nobody appears interested in. So
I'm interested. I think we have to give them the question. To just send out a group and say, give me back the information. That's what I was asking you, Mark. What would you feel comfortable putting together a staff report
But I mean, then you guys start saying it's not a city-led project, but then we're creating a survey, we're creating the questions, and then it becomes a city project. And we're putting staff, asking staff to do things, and that becomes a city project.
I'm not asking, so I wasn't asking Mark what to say. I'm just asking, would any of this help inform a basis for saying that he has sufficient information to say that the community supports a project?
Mark wouldn't make that decision. That would be up to us to just determine what that threshold is and whether, that's a policy decision once again, that's not a staff decision.
But the staff gives us a report to help us make the policy. So I guess it'd be up to us to then come up with the question. I mean, that seems challenging. But John, I think that would be part of my point. Would be we'd have to, as a group, then come up with the questions that you want to rely upon. If your survey is, then that would be it, right? You would give them, and then you'd have to come back with the answers to those questions. And would that be enough?
Right, and we would be using, the power of the city to, it's like a taxing authority. I mean, it really, you at that point give people no choice but to pay you back. We would have to take a separate vote, a series of votes to assess people, and then you would get a different opinions for people coming in and saying, oh, I didn't, maybe I didn't participate in the survey, and then you're wanting to assess my property.
Right.
So yeah, you have to buckle up for all of that.
And you take the risk. In the end of the day, you take the risk that the city would have to pay for it and
Yeah.
not get reimbursed.
Yeah.
And that would be a risk you'd have to take.
Yeah, if you got up here and you got 3 votes to say, not interested in doing an assessment, and we've already committed to, and we've already struck the check to do it, yeah, then that's. So, what our options include, I think we've all we understand where our positions are. I mean, I'm willing to be in a citizen-driven event that they wanted to come and ask the city to help them underground at their own cost. I'm up for that. As long as the educational process is going forward and everybody really understands what they're signing up for, I'm okay with that. It is, I agree, it is also difficult because of the variables to figure out what people know and what they don't know. And there will always be a risk that people will come back and say, hey, I signed that thing, but I didn't understand that.
So what does that motion look like? I know you don't want to make it, but what does it look like?
It would be, a policy, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a policy. I mean, you'd say the city is interested in assisting neighborhoods in undergrounding if the neighborhoods can prove that their residents are willing to be assessed for the cost.
So what is it?
I mean, that's all. That was it. Yeah,
So what was the motion? Because you asked to make a motion, so you're about to make a motion. So I'm asking, what's the alternative motion? I know what one motion is, and that's just let people do what they want to do. So I want to know what the alternative, because like I said, I'm with you. This is an opportunity lost. I just don't know what the.
Yeah, it is the current policy of the city that it will consider assisting communities or neighborhoods in paying the cost to underground their utilities.
I agree
If
with that.
a substantial majority of the neighborhood agrees to pay for it.
I'm with you on that, but how does that help us with the Duke issue? Like, how do we get what's the information that's going to be needed to get us to the Duke?
Yeah, that we'll know when we see it. I mean, it's kind of like, you'll know the information when it comes forward. You say this survey was shoddy, and I don't agree with it. I think people were misled, and I'm not voting for it. I mean, but that you will have that discretion on the day when it comes to it. So either we are or we are not interested in entertaining that type of thing. That's the only thing we can do about it. I'm not saying that we will vote for it. or that it's 70% or 80% or 60%. We're saying we are interested in considering it. And if we're not interested in considering it, we shouldn't send Shirley out. She's got her interest. She got better things to do.
And when would you want that, for the present issue at hand, when would you want that information back by?
We have, I've heard we have an April 30 deadline, so that's what I was aiming at, but perhaps that's too far. Because March is committed to the city. It gives us the time to digest whatever we got back. Because it's coming from the residents, it's not us pushing it out. We won't know it until we see it. And when it comes back, we'll know.
Is it necessary to make any sort of motion or policy or to announce that we're interested in, or what? If we don't say we're not, then theoretically we're always open to everything. But I have a lot of hesitation about putting something out there that I've voted on in that manner and making it a dichotomous proposition. Because I personally don't think it's fair to ask me if I'm interested in that, yes or no. Because if I say yes, then I feel that we sometimes have this habit of setting people up for expectations that are unfair, and then they come to us and they're disappointed when it doesn't work out the way that they feel that they were promised. On the flip side, if I say no, well, Lori isn't interested in helping us, and I don't know that either are true. So to me, what makes most sense is to say either we have a motion to vote to give direction that we can go forward, option number 1 tonight, or we make a motion, if it's possible, to vote on this again March 1st, whatever, on a different date, but not saying anything about all of this. Everybody can hear what we're saying, and they can do what they want with that information, or they cannot do that. But I have issue with the specific direction of things, if that makes sense. And I think that setting a vote, theoretically, if someone wanted to make a motion for it, I'm not sure that I would be the person that would be doing that, to table this until whatever date it makes sense to table it for, to give a definitive Duke answer prior to April 30th, then communities can do what they want. But I don't want to be pigeonholed to give a yes or no on what I might be open to hypothetically.
I'm just wondering if we did it and we came to that date, whatever date it is, if we would just have a really HOA meeting here, because the people who are for it would be here talking for it. The people who are against it would be sitting here saying, how dare you, try to, take money out of my pocket I'm not wanting to do. So I think it would turn into a big HOA meeting.
I think, John, what I'm hearing is that what Laura's saying is that really what you're asking for is just a continuance to have the information be brought back to you that says the community supports. You see enough support by the community to then feel comfortable starting the assessment process. Is that fair? Or no?
Yes, I think that's fair. The question is, do we want to be fair to the folks who are or not setting off to go do this? If there are enough votes up here that we're just not interested in undergrounding because it's too expensive for whatever reason, then they should know that. So that means it's a no tonight for sure, then they should know that and then not waste their time.
It's hard to say that, because they could go out and do that and then they get 20% support and then did they waste their time? You know what I mean? Like if they go out and do that and their community's not supportive of it, did they waste their time?
No, I don't think so. I think that that may well be what they find, is that there's only 40% support and, well, we tried.
So
Citizen engagement is never a waste of one's time.
Oh, no, you're right. I agree with that. So we're asking these people to go out who have we've dealt with this for 3 meetings, and we've called Mark, had conversations. We know the information, and we still have to ask Duke questions, but we're going to send out residents and say, here's what's going on. here's 3 questions, because, I mean, even with the 3 questions, you're still gonna have questions about the questions. What if this happens? So now we're asking those people, we're asking Shirley to say, oh, I can give you an answer.
And then Mark is now feeding questions back with the churn of Facebook misinformation and broken telephone. And then we are discussing this during public period, every meeting between now and April, because people will come with questions, understandably, because if we continue to give them hope and continue to ride this out, there will be more and more misinformation that will snowball itself.
This conversation, I don't know about you, when this, we've been talking about underground for so long, right?
Right.
And I expected when this thing came to us, it would look totally different.
Yes.
But because it got in this red and blue, and it got, to no fault of anybody, I think everybody did the right thing, and it was, we've all explored this so hard. But I always thought that, because it was in the CIP of every year that we voted for, and that was general fund money, that this would just be an issue of whether or not council believed that undergrounding was a priority. Without regard to, and where I think this got, and it's good, but because it got so micro-focused on an individual house, it even got beyond a neighborhood. It literally got to each specific house. Are you a red or a blue, and do you want to pay for it? If it had just come in and said, because we had said this for years, we were willing to put money into the CIP to pay for undergrounding citywide. And if it just had come to us saying, hey, city, do you want to commit over 10 years, let's just say, $500,000 a year, $5 million total, $500,000 a year over 10 years to underground as much of the city as it really feasibly makes sense. Would you do it? That's how I would have envisioned the question. And at that point, you could set a policy direction. And so I think if we just take all the mental gymnastics we've just all gone through and just said, do we believe in undergrounding? And if the answer is yes, then the mechanics of paying for it is almost the back end.
We, as a body, believe in undergrounding. I think that is fundamentally true. We all up here think that that is a good idea. What is the difference is that this is beyond our control. Most of this is not within our control. If we ran our own utility, we would be doing this on our calendar, on our schedule, on our budget, and our timeline, and we are not. We are doing it on somebody else's, and we have been wedged into the corner to make a decision on their timeline, not ours. Their costs, not ours. So we are being asked to come up with decisions faster than government acts, to come up with money faster than we can budget it, and we have no ability to forecast for the future because, again, we are not in control here. This is not our plan. If we were doing this with our utility, we would know 3 to 5 years out what we would be doing, what neighborhoods would be planned for, how much it would cost, because we would be forecasting it all out. It doesn't mean to say that in 2035, if and when we come to the point where we can buy the utility for ourselves, that we don't automatically put in a plan to underground everybody. But that will be because we have control of the situation. Right now, we do not have control. Duke is coming to us and saying, this is what we're doing. Do you want to play along? But we're not getting enough information to be able to say, this makes sense for us because we can forecast and budget 3 to 5 years out. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that information. So we are looking at it through a telescope. All we can see is what's directly in front of us. And we don't have any way of being able to budget around that or to forecast for it. Government does not work the same way as private industry. So we are diametrically at odds with the plan because it's not our plan. I am 100% in favor of undergrounding this city. I would love to do it. But are we going to do it on Duke's timeline and Duke's budget and with Duke's calendar? I don't think so. Because we can't do it effectively to make all the residents happy.
But
I would say, we are where we are. We've never had a utility.
Right.
We don't have a hope of ever having a utility. We have a small prayer, but I can tell you from experience that we have only a very small prayer. So we're not masters of our own destiny. So either you do or you don't believe in undergrounding. But any undergrounding is going to happen. It's going to happen in their system, their time, and on their budget. If you don't believe that, then you don't believe in undergrounding. Because there's no alternate universe where we own the utility.
And John, I think if we had 3 years ago, when we were voting on this just as a planning to get into the CIP, if someone had said to you at that point, that 500,000 you're budgeting for out years, that's going to be in concert with what Duke is going to do on their own, and they're going to underground, we would have said, that sounds awesome. And we would have signed up for that. But it's just taken a different turn, in my opinion. The conversations have taken, and again, it's been good discussions, and I think everyone's trying to solve the problem, but it's gone beyond what I think was the fundamental question of, and I think John's trying to get there, is do you believe in undergrounding? And it's not really do you believe in it, although it's a good question.
Will you pay for it, is really what I'm saying. Will you help pay for it?
But do you find it to be a priority of the city? And because it's gotten, when it was on a macro level, and we voted for things about master planning and doing things in the downtown, and we said, of course, yeah, we want to see the downtown underground, and we want to see all these things. We all said yes, or at least on the city council level, it was yes, we believe in an undergrounding of where possible. And so if it was just on that, to what Vance likes to say, I guess I like to say it, but at that bigger level, the answer is yes. It's just, we are now struggling with how to do it. And I think unless you just say, yes, it's something that the city's willing to do, and we're going to either find a way to special assess it or just pay for it out of general fund. So to me, the question to us, the mechanics of paying for it, and I agree with John that we do have some sources to pay for it if it was deemed a priority of the city. And if you go on to, well, that only impacts certain residents and it only benefits certain residents, and we don't want to do that. We do it all the time. We do parks that are in certain neighborhoods that pay for it. We take on projects that benefit a smaller percentage because overall we are serving the needs of a citywide, and certain things we're going to do are going to benefit certain residents, and some we're not. And people are going to say, why would you ever do that? A library, for example. There are going to be people who say, I never go to a library. And we may deem it important enough that we're going to fund the library out of whatever budget the city has. So to me, the question is, do we want to underground, and do we see that as a priority? And if the answer is to yes, then to me, it's the mechanics of paying for it coming in.
Right. That's not the motion, that's not the question.
What's that?
That's not the motion, that's not the question. To say, are you in favor of undergrounding, that's not really the question, that's not the motion.
It
so
could
what
be.
Is the motion?
The motion could be to tell Duke that there's two options, right? There are 1 and 2. There is let Duke do it. I think that's a clear option. The other option is where I disagree with John, is that there are all these mechanics. I think it gets more I think John's option, while it would be great, I don't think it's feasible. To me, the other option is we agree that undergrounding is a priority, then we agree to write the check. And if the city wants to collect it through money that we received elsewhere or with assessments, to me, that's a different. I think.
Yeah, I'm not willing for the city to come out of pocket until the residents have approved that they are going to pay for it. So I wouldn't put us in here in that sense. So yeah,
but I don't know how you get there, John. I don't know how you can guarantee that we're going to get repaid. That's why I think we all fall back to option 1 is really the only clear option, because I don't know, unless the city just decides.
Well, if it's the same council and it's within a month or 2, if the same council who strokes the check to Duke sits and listens and agrees to assess the residents a month or 2 later, that's the mechanics of it to me.
I think one of the issues to me is that every time in a briefing or something I ask about some of the other projects that I care about, libraries mentioned, some of the other things I've talked to Mark about, it's always that this particular conversation has kind of taken over our staff time, in particular to the other things that I care about so personally, and that I think are important to all residents. And so I think to me, whenever it's appropriate, I'm ready with, I have a motion.
I think we scared Shirley. I don't think she.
Come on, you.
Hey, no, I'm game. I'm following along, it's not a problem.
Well, if anybody wants to make a motion, now's the time.
I make a motion to give the city direction to allow Duke to proceed with identified projects per their design, effective as of the time we vote.
I will second that.
Motion and a second. Where do we call
Councilmember Wild?
First up, baby.
And that is not even extending at all time to get,
So wait, that was not in the motion. What was that?
I'm asking that the motion did not, so this is
I
this
said
is final
effective, I
answer.
said effective at the time of the vote, that was the motion.
Yeah, so this is our final answer.
Mhm.
So that this means to not hold on until April 30th. So, okay.
I'm a no for that. But next time I want to be called to the first approval minutes.
I'm sorry, this is how it flows. Councilmember Guthrie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel?
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes?
Nay. Okay. So, our next item is, that's it for the business reports. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any?
I do, and part of my memory, because I don't think I've told you this before. If I did, I apologize for repeating myself. But Judge Hsu recused himself after the election. And in the Peacock Court case, y'all can speculate as to why that might have been. I don't know. But because he did, he also automatically canceled what would have been our hearing on December 5th, ostensibly to get us out of everything. So we have a new judge. Kevin Weiss, I believe is his name, but we have not been able to successfully schedule with the Lowndes firm a new hearing date, and the last dates that were being circulated were sometime in February. So here we are. It's funny because I don't know at this point why we're still talking about this matter with these folks. It makes no sense to me. And if I was the plaintiff in the case, I would be pushing it instead of doing everything possible to drag it out. But maybe they think they can out-retire me. I don't know. But I'm going to be here for at least a while longer, so. That's all I have.
And that was, what was the hearing for just a meeting?
That was the third motion to dismiss, which in most venues would be you're out.
Okay. All right.
He did.
Nobody
asked if he just did.
Just real briefly, I think for everybody that attended the Season of Light celebration, it was very well done. The park was packed, the tree lighting went off smashingly and seamlessly and very professionally. And
What kind of tree?
it was, that tree, that spruce that celebrates the season.
Right.
But Jay's crew and Kim's crew, everybody that put all that work into it, it was, that was like the busiest weekend for events. When you get downtown, dovetail into Season of Light, then the farmers market, it's where they put themselves out there and they really came through again. So, thanks to all of them. Everyone that I talked to down there was very happy with everything that went on. The parents that I talked to, especially the middle school performers, they were just tickled pink to see their kids out there performing a venue like that. So it's nice that we can give them the opportunity to do that. So I thought it went very well. I'm sure there were hiccups out there that I'm not aware of. If I am made aware of them, we'll try to fix them.
It did go swimmingly, although the first person I talked to after tree lighting really just wanted to complain about the line at Starbucks on 1792 out here. So
Water is cold that we just threw on me, John.
Once you shook that off, and also, I mean, I guess we're not going to have a chance to meet in December, but going forward, there is a big farmers market coming up on Sunday, because this is Santa Claus is going to be there. They're trying to hide this, I guess, because they're going to miss 2 consecutive Sundays, because Christmas is on Sunday, and then they're going to miss January 1st as well.
So that'll be this week?
So it's going to be a big deal, farmers market this week.
Someone did ask me.
Bring your friends and family. All right, Madam City Clerk.
I heard from 3 of you, so you're going to be joining us tomorrow. I have. Okay. And so that's it. We'll look forward to that tomorrow.
All City Council, Lindsay, you have anything? Mike?
Not that I'm going to pain anybody with it.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to give props to Park looks great today. So whoever did that, or Public Works, I'm sorry.
Combination.
Yeah. Good job. It's beautiful out there tonight.
Oh, it's a joy to leave it dark every night and have that. It really is. It really makes you, when you're leaving here, it puts you in a very nice.
It does.
Yeah.
You're walking in.
Well, I participated in teach-in at Domrick Elementary, which is basically the career day. And first of all, thanks to the fire department and the police department for providing some stuff to make me look cool with the kids. And also Mayor Lowndes, I have a message from Ms. Matthews for her class at Domrick. They believe there should be a Kids in Charge Day announced in the city of Maitland. That was the overriding idea. So they also like to see more ice cream in Maitland.
So you just shovel that off to the mayor? I'd say you have the power as a city council person to take care of these wishes, don't you?
Okay, yes, and okay. And also the Santa Parade, if the fire department and police department could give my regards to the Grinch and to Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. We enjoyed coming through our neighborhood. And I see Stacy in the audience. We came to the Polar Express party, and I heard you make cookies that we enjoyed. And so thank you for all of the festivities.
It's the season.
All right. Well, on that happy note, let's adjourn.